We're on.
This meeting of the Margate Planning Board is called to order. Everyone is required to stand for the national anthem. Attention, salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Tom Collins. Clem Wozleski. Jim Galantino. Rich Patterson.
Here.
Mike Cristaldi. Margaret Gubernalti. Craig Palmisano. David Carter. Despina Hess.
Here.
Remy Pelosi.
Here.
Joe DiGirolamo. Mike Richmond.
This meeting has been advertised in accordance with New Jersey Sunshine Law, and the agenda has been properly posted in City Hall. If your application is approved tonight, please see the board secretary immediately after your case to sign appropriate documents. I'd like to hear a motion for the approval of minutes of August 31st, 2017. Jim? Mike? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to hear a motion for approval of decisions and resolutions. Number 37, 2017, Bicycle and Pedestrian Path. Number 38, 2017, Stanton Singer. Number 39, 2017, Robert Cation.
I'll make the motion.
Jim? Craig? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. The first case is Burst Greenbaum, 102 North Clarendon Avenue, Block 304.011, Lot 23, in the S25 district to grant C variances for building height and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mrs. Gubernaldi is recusing herself from this case. Roger, be sworn in.
Mr. McLaren, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is dated September 21st, 2017, in regard to 102 North Clarendon Avenue. Will you pick me up? No. Background, the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct a new single-family dwelling, with the variances being requested for items addressed below. In addition to the variances being requested, additional variances may have been identified as a 6-foot fence and dormers exceeding 15% of the floor area of the half-story. The first floor elevation is incorrect, as it should be set at 12, not 11. All that does is move it up 1 foot. Doesn't change the variances. You see the documents reviewed. The variances required are building height, whereas 28 feet from BFE plus freeboard. Elevation 12 is a maximum permitted height in height zone A, and 30 feet is proposed from elevation 11. It's a C variance. Fence height. I think the applicant can either correct it or ask for the variance. Show it as 6 feet, where 5 feet is the maximum permitted. Third floor dormer area. This is open to interpretation, but my interpretation is the maximum floor area for half a story above a second floor is 15%, and whereas at least 34.7% is proposed as a dormer, if not the entire 100% of if the definition of dormer is agreed upon. Definition in my comments section of a dormer is a roofed structure often containing a window that projects vertically beyond the plane of a pitched roof. Pretty simple. Additional comments are the building height is required to be measured from elevation 12 as determined by comparing both FEMA's ABFE map and preliminary firm map, which is probably what caused the difference in elevations. The applicant shall determine if additional variances will be sought for front yard step back. The reason that is if you have to go up a foot, you're going to need more steps. The plans show a fence with a proposed height of 6 feet. This may be a typographical error. The plans also indicate on sheet A2 that third floor dormer area is 0 square feet. I disagree with this calculation based on, as you can see, my argument. Again, I think the board ought to look at that and make a determination what is and what is not a dormer. and the testimony for the applicant will support their case and what a dormer is. The plans were not submitted or not signed and sealed, but I think we all agree that the architect is a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, and as a condition of approval, the signed and sealed plans will be submitted. A 7-on-12 roof pitch is proposed. I request that the roof lines be labeled to show that it is a 7-on-12. I think it's labeled on a couple spots, but some more labels would be helpful. The ground cover for all site areas need to be labeled as well. Recommendations are as follows, other than the normal C2 and C1 variance requirements. Lot grading shall be from the rear of the property to the front of the street. Please indicate where the underground utilities are to be located. We prefer that the water and sewer do not go in driveway areas. Roof lines may be continued to reduce areas counted as dormer space. Street opening permits will be required. Location of utilities would need to be shown, as I indicated before that. Construction details need to be shown also. That can be a condition of approval. That concludes my report for this application.
Thank you, Mr. McLaren. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, my name is Chris Balinson. I represent Bruce Greenbaum with respect to his application this evening for Lot 23, Block 301.01, 102 North Clarendon Avenue. The proposal this evening is to build a new house on the site, to demolish the existing house. I will initially eliminate a bunch of variances that Roger had pointed out. The fence will be 5 feet, not 6 feet. The front steps will conform, even though the elevation will change. There's enough room to get the 2 steps in there without encroaching into the setback. We will discuss the dormers briefly, but I will point out that one of the dormers contains the stairs. I've done, I don't know how many designs of a similar nature of this, where that stair tower on the side of the house has not been counted as a dormer because it does not project from the roof, nor contains no floor area at the 3rd floor, which is usable. It simply runs up the side of the house from the 1st floor. That, in my recollection, has not been called out as a dormer in years. But we can discuss that, hopefully not for too long.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It is a dormer, but it should not be counted against the floor area.
Because there is no floor area.
Correct.
We're on the same page.
Right.
Kind of. I'm fine with that. The dormer on the other side, I think, Roger, you also have it called out as too large. That, as you...
It's the aggregate of them, not just the one in particular.
Then if we can get relief on the one, have that found that is not a dormer because the floor area doesn't count, then we can make the dormers comply. So the only variance I will be left with, I hope, is the 2 feet in height, which is what I anticipated to come and talk about.
Do you want to,
So the square footage on the remaining dormer will be 15% of the 3rd floor area?
That's correct. It may require modification of the roof line, as Roger had pointed out, but that will be done to make sure.
I just want to clarify what you're saying.
Yes, it will fall
Okay.
within the definition, yes.
All right. One other thing on, that you mentioned the fence, and I know you're not asking for a variance now, but I couldn't tell from the plan, does the fence go, I only see it going up the bay side and across the back. Does it come up the ocean side too?
Yes, it does. The intent is
Okay.
to go around.
here, because it actually goes over here. There's a gate.
John, you want to get up?
So it doesn't come down the ocean side?
The intent is for it to come down the ocean side as well.
On the other side of the driveway?
Go ahead.
No, the ocean side, it stops by the.
He needs to be sworn in.
Oh.
Mr. Chairman, stops back by the shed at the back of the house.
Got it.
It's on the plan.
All right.
Tom, please.
Your name and address?
Tom Baglivo.
You need a microphone, please?
Tom Baglivo, address 301 East Germantown Pike, East Norriton, PA 19401.
And can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Tom, if you would, you're a licensed professional architect,
Yes.
and you prepared the plans to be submitted that the board is considering tonight,
Yes.
and you agree with me that the fence height will be reduced to 5 feet?
Correct, I
Your
do.
your front steps, when the elevation of the first floor changes, can be brought into conform?
Compliance, correct.
And speak to the board about the dormers and why you believe that the dormers you've designed fall within the intent of the definition.
As you previously stated, the dormer above the stair should be negated from habitable space on the third floor because the dormer is to create the stair, and there's no actual habitable space above the stair. The front dormer originally, because of the hip roof, doesn't protrude past the edge of the roof. And the side dormer where the shower is, we were considering that our dormer.
And that falls within 15%?
15% of the third floor.
And the front dormer, to the extent the roof line needs any type of tweaking or design to make it conform to the ordinance, you're comfortable doing that?
Yeah, we could adjust the roof to accommodate the dormer so it becomes part of a gable end. And then it's not a dormer
And
at that point.
you've discussed that with Mr. McLaren, and you believe you can work that out so that it does not require a variance and complies with the ordinance?
Yes.
That then leaves the variance we had intended to come in for this evening, which is what, please? The height?
For the height, for the 30 feet height of the total house with 2 feet above the required 28 feet.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are requesting that variance in light of the fact that it is anticipated that the board and the governing body will, with the master plan reexamination, move height from 28 to 30. We therefore would submit that will be in compliance with the ordinance, and it will be where the height of homes will be once that ordinance is adopted. And we would therefore request that the board act consistent with what is proposed with an ordinance change in that regard, and request no other variances with this application.
Did you say it's a 712 pitch?
It is.
Yes.
Okay.
I know you have a big night. I have nothing further.
Any questions, comments from the board?
You know, the shed being 6 inches off the property line there,
Yeah, we also have the eaves within the property line as
and
well.
then you need a gutter on it, because you can't drop the water onto the neighbor's property.
Correct.
It's been a problem in town, so you got the 6 inches, then a 5-inch gutter. You're not working. You're an inch,
They usually
you're
do
an
that
inch
during
within it, but
the
how do you,
inspection process.
Yeah, we normally keep it within, we're 6 inches, I mean, the choice would be to move it in a little further. Or to-
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, we've had trouble with the gutters and the property line and neighbors fighting.
Yeah,
So,
so if we put gutters, we'll shoot them onto the property versus.
and move the shed in a little bit,
Move the shed in a little bit, okay.
rear and
So you
side,
want the shed in 11 inches?
rear and side.
So if we move it in 11 inches, we don't need a gutter. Is that-
You need a gutter either
move-
way.
Regardless, okay, yeah, so move it into 11 inches, that's
Right.
fine. Inches more. Agree.
Thank you, Clem. I needed that. Mr. Chairman, I'm good.
Greg?
How far will the fence come on the ocean side of the house? Will it equal the other side where the gate is on the,
At the ocean side of the house, if you look close, there's a gate at the back.
Mr. Golden, it's gonna come right to the shed at the back of the house.
There's a door between the house and the shed. If you notice, the door is a little gate. It's not actually a door.
on the right side?
Ocean side.
Ocean side is the left side.
Yes, ocean side is the left side.
So if you go to the garage or the garage would meet the house, the gate's going to attach the garage to the house with a gate, a fence.
Can I just mention, it has nothing to do with a variance or anything, but the neighbor was concerned about their kids who play in the backyard in the driveway. Is there any consideration of putting a fence down there, or? We can't make you, we're not
No,
gonna make you.
and there really wasn't, only because the catch-22, you can't, you have problems opening the car door sometimes with the driveways. Right now, there's not, right?
Well, then the neighbor may put a fence up herself, but either way, we can't stop her, whatever. I just wanted to mention that if
Thank
it
you.
wasn't a problem. Any other questions from the board? Clem, into the mic, please.
What are we considering dormers, and we have 4 roofs, all of which are more or less alike. Apparently, we're considering some of them to be dormers and some of them not to be dormers. Which is which?
I could argue that they're all dormers. But I'd be open to the interpretation that the hip roof dormer, if you raise the roof up and it's a gable end, it's not a dormer anymore. So why not allow it to be as a dormer? Until we get a...
Which would create more mass, correct?
Correct.
So then we're figuring we have two dormers, the front and right side. The left side doesn't count because it's a stair.
Well, it's
The rear
still a
doesn't
dormer, but
count.
it doesn't count against the floor area.
The reason for the hip is because we're trying to make the house appear
Right.
so it's not as massive. Anyway,
That was my point. It's
My
less
recommend-
massive, it's less massive this way,
Elevation
right?
height, yeah. So
One reason I brought it up tonight was to get some feedback from the board. I think we should allow the hip roof in the front and the rear and not consider it to be a dormer yet. Unless we specifically allow for it.
I think more sun is actually gonna come in if it's a dormer with a roof versus a full gable end, which is now gonna actually block probably 3 or 4 feet more of sun. That's the whole concept of it.
And basically,
We're not complaining about it.
Roger,
whether it's a hip roof or a gable end, the floor area stays the same.
Roger, isn't this something that we should determine through some of your work session committees?
Yes.
He's already taken the variance away, so all we're voting on is height.
Well, that's
No
what
matter
we
what
had just
Justin
talked about, that
explains.
we're not gonna decide it tonight. We
Yeah.
will do it in a work
So
session.
we should get that into a work session and come up.
Yes.
You guys come up with
Mhm.
it.
Yes. Brilliant.
And just to add, besides the design being minimizing the appearance, it's actually smaller. The building coverage is only at 33%, and they could go to 40%, so it's definitely something you should keep in mind.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Desmond. What?
Trying to help move things along.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to comment? Please come forward and be sworn in.
Your name and address, please.
David Nathanson, 104 North Clarendon Avenue, and I am next door to where the...
I just have to swear you in. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I just have really one or two basic questions here. I understand that the fence is going to be, it's a legal setup here. However, how far down does the fence come along my driveway? Is it all the way to the curb?
No, it can't go past the front of the house.
Okay. Is that how far it's going? To the front of the
I don't know.
house?
Which side do you live on?
Okay, 104, if you're facing the house, I'm on the right-hand side.
It's coming about 2/3 down his proposed
Correct.
property, or building,
Yep, if you wanna look right
and
here.
halfway down the property line.
Here's the back of the house, here's the front.
It shouldn't affect your sight line for driving in
Here's
by
the side.
backing out.
Okay, this gate.
That's about 15 feet beyond the front end of the house.
Okay,
Beyond
does
the
it
front end.
swing in or swing out?
Swings into the yard.
Into the yard. Okay, so if they come out of their house and the gate is on my property, how do, they've got to come across?
No, the gate swings into the yard of their,
I
their
understand that.
property.
Now they open the gate, they take trash out, whatever, and how do they avoid not coming onto the property of mine?
Well, the gate, when open, is laying against,
Got it.
How
My
one of-
driveway, this butts up to my driveway, is that correct? Now they open the gate, here's my driveway.
Just they're taking trash out this
How do they avoid coming onto our property? And I'm not, you know, I just,
They walk straight to the street.
I don't understand.
Their property goes all the way straight to the street, not your driveway.
but the gate opens onto where our driveway is. That's
No, it-
No, it doesn't.
No, it
No,
doesn't.
it doesn't? It-
No. If, how could it, so the gate,
This is my driveway, correct?
correct.
Okay, this is the gate.
No. The fence is on the property line.
Okay,
So if I could draw you a diagram,
Yeah.
this is the proposed house.
okay,
Here's your house.
right.
This is the property line, the gate all the way against their house.
Oh,
not their house.
okay.
makes
So,
sense?
yeah, so it is a solid fence.
It's a solid fence,
Okay.
it turns, and then the gate's here, your house is there.
And from the back of the house, you said it comes down about how far?
Less than 2/3 of the house, so it's pushed back.
15 feet from the sidewalk line.
15
Okay.
feet, it's almost 30 feet from the sidewalk.
Oh, I
That's
thought you
15
said
beyond the edge
15
of the
feet.
house.
Oh, okay.
So you wouldn't see it
35
at
from the
all.
back.
I don't care about seeing it. And again, I realize that it's a perfectly legal gate. It's just that we use our driveway and, you know,
Yeah, it wouldn't even be near, the gate, even when the gate's fully open, it would not encroach the
the
property
fence
line.
itself.
Correct.
The fence itself, so we.
And
do
it
have
swings into
those
the,
doors, our car doors, and,
right, and the gate swings into their yard, so if anything, it obstructs
yeah,
inside of
the
their
way
yard.
I was looking at it, as I said.
Is reversed, yeah, correct.
Alrighty. The only other thing that I would consider is because of the sun, and we use our back all the time in nice weather. So whatever, way you can help us with the sun and, air would absolutely be a plus. I would appreciate it. Other than that, have fun with your house.
Well, the
Thank
hip
you.
roof in the back would help,
Okay.
get more sun.
We would get more light that way. I mean, hopefully the board will consider it then.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to comment? Public portion's, oh, I'm sorry. Done. Public portion is closed. Any other comments or questions from the board before we vote? Leo, would you read a motion, please?
Sure, we need a motion for C variance relief to permit building height at 30 feet where 28 feet is permitted. I have a condition that the shed will be moved back, or moved in 11 inches, and rain gutters will be installed on the shed.
I'll make that motion.
Tom? Jim?
The setback will be 11 inches, right?
The setback will be 11 inches, yes.
Tom Collins?
Mr. Balanson, smartest thing you did is get rid of all those variances on an empty lot, except for the height. And the height's gonna be done anyway. Pretty much everything complies. The property is gonna be beautiful. It's gonna fit into the neighborhood. I don't see any negatives to the C1 or C2 criteria, so I vote in favor.
Clem Wazewski?
Since it appears that we're shortly going to go to 30-foot allowable height, there's no reason to vote other than in the affirmative.
Jim Galantino?
I agree with Tom. We're moving forward to the 30-foot height. And it's a nice house that Tom's building over there. I think it's going to blend in nice with the neighborhood. I don't see any negatives. I approve.
Rich Patterson?
I also approve. I see no negatives. The variance would not even be needed a few months from now, so I vote yes.
Mike Cristaldi?
As with the rest of the board members, I vote yes.
Craig Palmisano?
I also agree with the board members.
Mike
vote
Richmond?
Yeah, I agree with the other board members. We're going to raise the height anyway, and I don't see any negative impacts. I vote yes.
Application passes 7-0. Chris, will you please come sign?
Next case is Deborah Scholar, 13 South Jasper Avenue, Block 111.01, Lot 6, in the S25 district. To grant a C variance for building height and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mrs. Gubernaldi is back on the board, and Mike Richmond has recused himself. Roger?
Thank you, board members, board chairman. My report is in front of you. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the city of Margate in order to construct a new single-family dwelling with variances being requested for items addressed below. Existing structure is to be demolished, obviously. The variances required are as follows. Building height, whereas 28 feet from BFE plus freeboard, elevation 12 is the maximum permitted height in height zone A, and 30 feet is proposed from elevation 12, which is a C variance. Distance between detached garage and adjacent principal structure, whereas 5 feet minimum setback is required and 3.67 feet is proposed. AC unit setback, whereas the minimum setback is 5 feet and 4.5 feet is proposed. However, the applicant may decide to move those and get rid of that one variance. Our standard, and instead of reading all through the comments or recommendations, which are minutia for this application, that concludes my report.
Thank you, members. My name is Chris Balance, and I represent Deb Sklar with respect to her application this evening for her house at 13 South Jasper Avenue, Lot 6, Block 111.01. Again, proposal for a new single-family home. This application brings about 1.5 variances. I don't agree that the distance between the house and the garage should be a variance, and I'll tell you why. But the other variance is, as we stated before, it's 2 feet of height, 28 where 30 is required. Let me talk to you before Peter's introduced. Let me talk to you about why I don't.
Take the mic with you, please, or there's one right there.
Why I don't believe the distance from the garage to the principal structure on the adjacent lot should be a variance. We have two controls. One is 5 feet from the garage to a principal structure on the next lot, and one is house to house, which is 10 feet. If I'm building a new house which is completely conforming, and my neighbor has a non-conforming setback, whether it's her garage or whether it's her house, I should not be penalized and forced to move my house over because of that non-conforming condition. That creates an unfair burden on anybody who's going to build a new house, and when you take it ultimately to the end, it kind of ostracizes certain lots at the end of the day, because lots that have houses that are further or have greater setbacks next to them will be the more attractive lots, because they won't be constrained to have to slide the house over because of where my neighbor's at.
But where were you when I had to get this variance for my house, Chris?
I don't know, where's Brian Callahan at?
Grade school.
I thought you.
I agree with you.
I'd hate to see, and hate to tell you, they'll be driving people around saying, oh, you don't want to look at that lot. Look, the house next door has 2 feet, and the other house is 2 feet. You know, you'll need setbacks of 10 feet on each side. That's not, I don't think that's what was intended.
Chris, that's actually going to be addressed citywide.
Okay.
We had that problem next to me in another house. It will be addressed. I was confused. I thought it was between this structure and the garage. It's not. It's between this garage and the adjacent structure?
Correct. Between the new garage on the Sklar house, the applicant's house, and the adjacent principal structure.
The variance is being caused by the existing structure next door, which is clearly a hardship on this applicant.
That's what I was gonna say, that's
I can do nothing about
the
it.
strongest hardship I can imagine is something
But let's
that's
not-
not on your property.
Yeah,
Just accept it as a variance and,
I just wanted to put that on the record for going forward.
yes.
The second variance, he can talk about. Ready to be sworn? I got to put something on the record.
I'm sorry, Mr. White. State your name and address for the record.
Peter Weiss, Washington Avenue, Margate.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank
The
you.
board will accept Mr. Weiss's credentials.
Exactly.
Peter,
Perfect.
the house you've designed, you will make the condenser conform at 5 feet versus 4.5 feet?
Yes.
And the other variance that's being requested is as consistent with the ordinance proposal from 28 feet in height to 30 feet?
Yes.
And otherwise, the home is variance-free
Yes.
and complies with the S25 controls?
Yes.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Anything from the board? Any other questions or comments? Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak? Please come forward and be sworn in.
Your name and address, please.
Gerald Green, 15 South Jasper. I just wanted to identify
One
myself
sec.
as
All right.
Stop.
One sec. Mr. Green, your first name again?
Gerald Green, Gerald with a J, E-R-A-L-D.
And do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Go.
Yes, I was going to say I live in the adjacent structure, and I certainly don't want it to be a hardship to my neighbors, so I'm all in favor of what they want to do.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that I've been a problem.
Thank you.
Oh, and incidentally, I'll be here next month, October 26th, so I look forward to seeing you all then.
We do too. Anyone else from the public like to speak? Public portion is closed. If there's no other comments.
Rich, just
Yes? Go ahead. Go ahead.
clarification, because I was confused too. I thought that the new garage was gonna be too close to the new end.
That's what I thought, but that's not the case.
So the hardship is that the other house is non-conforming?
The principal structure is, yes.
Okay, it's too close to the property.
Too close to the garage, yes.
Thank you.
Please read the motion.
Sure, need a motion for C variance relief to permit a building height of 30 feet where 28 feet is permitted, and a variance to permit 3.67 feet between the garage on the subject property and the principal structure on the neighboring property where 5 feet is required.
Hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mike? Jimmy?
Tom Collins,
Again, getting rid of variances, Chris, I like it. It's a shame that a non-conforming property, and I can understand after I look at the prints, there is a hardship there. I don't think it causes any detriment to the neighborhood. I think what you're proposing is going to be an improvement to the neighborhood, and for the betterment of Margate, so I vote in favor.
Clem Wozleski,
Is this on? On. As the last application, the only thing they're asking for is something we're going to have shortly anyhow, so I vote in favor.
Jim Galantino,
I don't see the negatives. The property's going to look beautiful when it's probably done, and I agree with Tom. It's getting rid of a lot of variances. Thanks, Chris. I approve.
Rich Patterson,
I also vote yes for the same reasons previously stated.
Mike Cristaldi,
Because of Chris's speech, I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty,
I agree with Mr. Collins, and I vote in favor of the application.
Craig Palmisano,
I also agree with the application and the other board members. I agree with them.
application passes 7-0.
We're going to turn these, they can use these right now.
Next, excuse me, the next case is J. Thomas Construction LLC, 24 South Washington Avenue, Block 127, Lot 202, in the CBD District to grant a C variance, minimum lot area, lot width, lot coverage, and front yard setback to building and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
And Roger, before you start, this involves a use variance, correct?
Yes.
So I think we need a couple of board members, a D variance.
Yeah.
So Mr. Collins and
Mr. Collins and
Mr. Galantino will step down.
Are not here.
Proceed.
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is in front of you for J. Thomas Construction Company, LLC. This property is located in the CBD zone, which requires commercial use on the ground floor. Residential use above the ground floor is permitted. No commercial use is being proposed, therefore a use variance is required. It's in the FEMA AE's elevation 10 zone, where the ABFE 12 zone plus 1 is 13 feet is the minimum floor elevation for habitable space. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct a new single-family dwelling with variances being requested for items addressed below. The existing structure is to be rehabilitated, is my understanding, with removal of the existing commercial on the first floor and maintain residential uses above, which exist today. The commercial space would be converted to garage space and storage space, which is the only permitted use below BFE. The site is located within the CBD zone adjacent to the multifamily zone. The proposed use is single-family, and therefore single-family zoning rules apply as per Schedule B1. Looks like a lot of variances, but because of the requirement of being in the CBD zone, there's a little footnote in the ordinance that says you have to go to the MF zone. If you go to the MF zone, it says no matter what, for a single-family use, you have to go to the single-family zoning requirements. which triggers most of these variances. So I will go through them. The first variance is a use variance, which is a D variance. Supermajority rule, vote is required, whereas the property is within the CBD zone permitting residential use on the upper floors but not on the ground floor. The residential ground floor use is proposed for the garage and storage. Lot area, whereas 4,000 square feet minimum is required and 1,625 square feet is existing area and proposed area, so it's an existing non-conforming situation. That's according to Schedule B2, which refers to the CBD zone. Lot width for CBD zone, whereas 50 feet width is required minimum, and the for the CBD zone, and 26 feet is the existing width and proposed width. This too is an existing non-conforming situation, as per Schedule B2. However, for the lot width residential use, whereas 40 feet is required minimum width for the S25 zone, which is the most closely related zone this will comply with, and 26 feet is existing width and proposed width. Again, this is an existing nonconformity, whether it's CBD use or residential use. That's per Schedule B1. Front yard porch deck setback, whereas the prevailing setback, or 5 feet, is required minimum setback for the residential zone, and minus 0.2 feet is a proposed setback, therefore it's an encroachment. That's per Schedule B1. An encroachment license would be required to permit an encroachment, granted only by the governing body, not by the planning board. Front yard setback for the building, whereas the prevailing setback of 13 feet or 5 feet is a required minimum setback for any residential zone, and minus 0.2 feet is a proposed setback. Again, this mimics the porch setback, Schedule B1. An encroachment license would cover all encroachments. Side yard setback, whereas the minimum setback for the S25 residential zone is 5 feet and the proposed minimum setback is minus 0.2 feet, there's an encroachment, Schedule B1. According to the plans, the ground floor is to remain, therefore the encroachments remain. I think the board ought to consider that. Combined side yards, whereas a minimum combined side yard setback for the S25 residential zone is 10 feet and the proposed minimum combined side yard setback is 0.4 feet. That includes a minus 2 and adding that with the 0.6. And again, it includes encroachment. That's per Schedule B1. Building coverage, whereas a maximum building coverage for the S25 zone of any lot less than 3,000 square feet is 40%, and 71.77% is proposed, or 71.7. That's per Schedule B1. Landscaped area, whereas the minimum required landscape area, or vegetative surface, is 35% for residential use, and the proposed coverage is 0%. The applicant may want to clarify that, as the ground cover was not labeled in the rear yard. Front yard landscape area, whereas the minimum required front yard landscape area vegetative surface is 60% for residential use, and the proposed coverage is 0%. Waiver or variance number 12 is a minimum distance between external walls of principal buildings. Again, this is similar to the previous application, whereas 10 feet is the minimum required distance, and 1.1 feet and 4.8 feet are the existing proposed distances on either side. Again, this is caused by the existing structures that are residential use on either side, creating a hardship for this property. And even if this property complied with the setbacks, it would not comply with this minimum distance between external walls of principal buildings. No waivers have been requested. My comments, I don't know if you want me to read through all these. I think we fully understand and appreciate the variances and what's driving these variances. Board Chairman, would you like me to read the comments? Or? Actually, yes. Okay. I thought you'd say that. The residential use has been in existence, however, there was commercial use below the residential, which made it a permitted use. The removal of the commercial use creates the use variance. The area is adjacent to the MF zoning district, but the proposed use mostly resembles the S25 use. Section 175, attachment 4-4, column 1, Schedule B1 indicates that multifamily zones shall be used shall use the adjacent chart for single-family uses, meaning the chart next to the MF column.
Roger, it's MF on the left side and it's CBD on the right side, is that correct?
No, there's a footnote in the CBD chart that says any residential use must use multifamily standards.
No, I'm saying this, you say it's adjacent to the,
Yes, multifamily is
is on the
adjacent.
left side?
Correct.
And it's CBD on the right side, correct? Okay, go ahead.
And the building directly behind it is multifamily zone also. The existing lot area is 1,625 square feet, and no adjacent vacant land is available to purchase to enlarge the lot. This is an existing non-conforming situation. Since the building currently exists on the lot, it is a buildable lot by definition. The existing lot width is 26 feet, and no adjacent vacant land is available to purchase to enlarge the lot width. This is an existing non-conforming situation. It's a buildable lot, as mentioned in item number 3. The front yard setback for both porch and deck shall comply with the prevailing setbacks or a minimum of 5 feet. The plans indicate that a 0-foot setback is proposed, yet the plans also indicate that the ground wall is to remain, which encroaches. Therefore, the encroachment remains, and the board may consider somehow removing that encroachment. The front yard setback for the building shall comply with the prevailing setback of 13 feet. The plans indicate that a 0-foot setback is proposed, yet the plans also indicate that the ground wall is to remain, which encroaches. This encroachment should be removed. Comment number 7, the minimum side yard setback for residential use for the existing lot width is 5 feet. 0.6 feet is the proposed largest setback proposed, and encroachment is proposed on the other side. Comment number 8, the minimum combined side yard setback for residential use for the existing lot width is 37% of the lot width, which calculates to be 9.62 feet. Since the minimum side yard setback is required to be 5 feet, the minimum combined side yard setback is therefore 10 feet. 0.4 feet is the proposed combined side yard setback, which includes the 0.6 foot setback on one side and a negative 0.2 foot setback. Encroachment is proposed on the other side. Comment number 9, building coverage for residential lots less than 3,000 square feet are permitted to have 40% building coverage. 77.7% is the proposed and possibly existing building coverage. The existing floor plans differ slightly from the proposed floor plans, hence a possible building coverage discrepancy. It's still well over the required minimum or maximum. The landscape area requirements for both front yard and total landscaping are not even being addressed and are required to be shown. The plans do not indicate whether or not any landscaping is provided or not. A planting item, comment number 11, is a planting strip is not feasible at this location due to the wide driveway being proposed, and the entire area is concrete anyway. No street trees are proposed, whereas one could be provided opposite the front entryway, which is proposed. The applicant shall provide proposed grades for the public right-of-way for the sidewalk, the curbing, and the driveway. The sidewalk has to comply with ADA standards that have been in place since 1990. There is an existing adjacent access easement to the north of the property, and that is to remain in place and not be encroached upon. The minimum distance between external walls of principal buildings is less than required, and the hardship is caused by the existing structures adjacent to the property, which are also residential uses, plus the use of the existing walls of the property in question. Minimum side yards for CBD zone are 0 feet, so the walls comply for CBD use. However, both properties in the CBD zone are residential and are non-compliant. The AC units are not shown on the plans, and they should be indicated if another variance is required for that. The ground floor shows the storage area in front of the garage area. The area should be reversed so the vehicles can enter and exit without material and storage items being in the way. The side yard offsets to the second floor are not indicated and may require an additional variance. And as you can see from my recommendations, for the requirements for a D variance and the C variances below. And the applicant can comment on the recommendations whether he intends to comply or not. That concludes my report. Leave it up to you, Board Chairman.
Mr. Goldstein?
Chairman, Mr. McLarnon, members of the board, Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicant. Just by way of background, a few things I'm sure the board is aware of. structure is right over here on Washington Avenue. This property was severely damaged in Hurricane Sandy. It fell into a foreclosure situation, and ultimately, it was abandoned by its prior owner. Sheriff's deed was obtained via foreclosure, and then the property was sold just this year in April to the current applicant. The commercial that had existed on the first level was, we believe the last commercial, which was before Hurricane Sandy, was a dentist office. The dentist abandoned the office, abandoned the house, residential above, and we found ourselves with a pretty beat-up house after the sheriff's sale that needed a fair amount of rehab. We're looking at this almost as it would be a house raise, just everything is going up in place. With the existence of the failed commercial on the first floor, the idea was do something positive with that. We don't think we can do anything with commercial on the first floor based upon what we're seeing on the side streets, which Mr. Barnhart is going to speak to a little bit later. So the idea that next followed would be parking. As you can see on the plan, although it's a little bit tough to see until Mr. Obelenis walks through, we're taking failed ground floor commercial and turning it into off-street parking, which, as everyone knows, in this area of town is at a premium. So we believe, which we're going to go through now, that this is the best possible plan for this property. The plans show that this property will be three-bedroom house. We're not asking for anything significant. The new development will comply with the setbacks. It's just that ground floor, other than tearing the building down to the ground, is impossible to comply. You've got 8 other structures, both sides of the street on Washington Avenue, where you have first floor residential below the BFE. We're going to have first floor parking, all the residential above the BFE. Having said that, I'd like to swear in Mr. Obelenis to walk through the plans, and then Mr. Barnhart later to walk through the planning purposes for the D and the C variances.
And
Mr.
John, you
Obelenis?
could just state your name and address for the record.
John Obelenis, 102 South 8th Street.
Could you use the microphone,
Grab the-
please, John?
Just why don't you grab that one?
Hello?
And John, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I will.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Obelenis is a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. He's appeared here many times.
We accept his credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. All right,
Thank you.
John, would you walk us through the plan from the ground floor up? Specifically, Mr. McLarnon has some questions about landscaping. It's not shown in the rear yard. That's going to be grass, but we'll walk through as you do your plan. And please, if you don't mind commenting specifically with regard to the setbacks that are being maintained for the residential portion.
Thank you. This is an existing structure, obviously, and we're changing that first floor retail to parking. And there's a couple of typos here. The storage is really not storage. It's space in front of the garage door, which is a legitimate parking space. And then you have the garage. And then behind the garage, there's adequate storage for recycling and trash and stuff. Basically, with the existing footprint, parts of it that do encroach into neighbors in the front and the side, there is a rear deck that's not shown here for the existing home. There's a deck that pretty much takes over the entire rear yard to get access to the second floor above the retail. That's going to come down, and that whole back area that's shown as a blank space will be landscaping, grass, pretty much permeable
That
surface.
entire wooden structure in the back comes down?
That all comes down, because we don't need that to get access to the living space above. That's going to be through the main part of the building. It's a single-family residence with the garage at the first floor. They're going to access the upstairs, up floors with the stairs on the side. So that whole structure gets torn down, cleaned up in the back, and all dedicated to landscaping and stuff. And again, the typos, ignore the typos, it's all garage. And we do have parking basically for 4 cars, if you look at it, with legal parking spots in front. You have 2 cars in the garage, which are legal spots, and you have 2. So we're basically taking 4 cars off the street, at least with this version.
Now, Mr. Obelenis, one thing on the plan that we had talked about a little earlier, let me show this to the board. This area in front here, the garage door is not at the front portion of the house, correct?
Correct.
It's actually set back, so there's parking in front for 2 cars if need be, and parking behind the garage door for an additional 2 cars, correct?
Yes, we haven't, it's basically, it's not clear in the plan, but it's an arched opening right at the street facade. So it's an open arched appearance, and then this is all open space. There's no closure.
Is it open on the sides too?
Well, the entire length, the entire width of that.
The sides?
No, the sides are enclosed because that's the support for the building. That's your building, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, it's an open air, almost like a porte cochere that will allow 2 cars parking, and then you have your garage door, and then a legitimate garage behind that. So there's no closure on the sidewalk.
Because we're talking about parking. You've got this with 2 cars shown, but you have 2 additional legal parking spaces before you get to the garage door, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so there are actually far more, you've got double the parking than you have shown the cars on your map. 4 cars instead of 2 to fit there.
Yes.
Okay. good.
Yes. So that's the first floor. Parking, we have storage, you have trash. There was mention about the HVAC units. There, again, we have plenty of rear yard to locate HVAC units in their proper locations. Not shown here, but we have room for that.
As Chairman Patterson indicated, the structure in the back, which is the access to the upper portion, is being completely eliminated in favor of open grass space and landscaping in the back.
Yes.
Eric, is there 2 residential units upstairs or 1?
One, it looks like it's 2.
Well, there's
One.
4 electric meters.
Maybe forever ago, Mr. Patterson, there were.
Okay.
But after the storm, Mr. Stifel bought the property, there's just one big mess of a space.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in that living space upstairs, the way it was existing, again, our proposal is to change that, is there were 2 bedrooms on the Washington Avenue side, a bathroom in the middle, and living at the back of the house. And that was because they had the big deck at the back that pretty much took over the rear of the yard. So in our scheme, we're maintaining the existing walls up to that first floor living area. They're going to stay the same. We're going to reassign the living spaces so that the living and the kitchen and the dining are front-loaded. They face Washington Avenue. We're going to locate 2 bedrooms at the rear. Being that we're 0 lot line to the sides, there are no windows. Look, all the windows are going to be at the front and at the rear of the property. So the windows on the living dining side will be facing Washington. Bedroom windows for egress and building code are located at the rear. Again, staircase, yeah.
This is important as well. There's not going to be a possibility of somebody looking out a window into another property that's adjacent. You've got the condominiums on both sides. That area will be completely free of windows, and you'll have your ingress and egress from windows for emergency purposes in the front and the back of the property.
Yes, pretty much like a townhouse, where you have pretty much front access and rear access, but nothing to the side. So this mimics a townhouse-type construction.
But for emergency personnel purposes, there will be access in the front and the back for both Washington Avenue and in the portion of the property that's north of Washington Avenue.
Well, when you say emergency access, we're 0 lot line, so I'm not sure of your question.
Someone needs to get out the window.
Oh, yes. Well, that's what, the bedrooms have to be egress windows by code as it is. And the front, we have a proposed porch that, from the living areas and the kitchen areas, you can go right out to the front porch, which faces Washington Avenue.
I point that out for the board only because I know the board is always concerned about the minimum distances between buildings. Here you're going to have access in the front and the back, so the fact that there is no access on the sides wouldn't inhibit an emergency responder from getting someone out in case of an actual emergency, correct?
Correct.
Okay, continue.
And to finish up that second floor living area, we tried to keep it to, I don't want to say Margate standards, but it's an open plan. We don't have a lot to work with, being that it's a very narrow lot. We're working with existing walls, existing conditions, at least for that first living floor. So we tried to create as much living space as possible and some basic bedrooms and a bathroom. So that kind of completes that first living. We added a second floor to that, not a third floor, but a second floor, which would be a master bedroom suite. That addition built above the existing plan will have side yard setbacks. We're proposing a 5-yard setback, a 5-foot setback on one side. The stairs is 0, but then there's another 4-foot setback. So that third or the second floor addition will have setbacks that break it apart from the side yards. And that would be your master bedroom suite. And upstairs above that is just attic space. So we're not talking about a third floor. It's basically a garage floor, parking, a living second floor, and then a master bedroom suite on the living first floor, and a master bedroom suite on the second floor addition, which we hope that would conform with the setbacks.
So are you raising the building, or are
No,
you
no, we're
demolishing
working with,
it?
it turns out that the structure for I call the first living floor, it's a
Right.
truss system, and we're gonna use that to support that as a living space for the first living floor.
Okay, so you are keeping that, what now would be the second floor, is that what you're saying?
We're keeping, yeah, well, there's the ground floor, the original retail floor.
Right, you're tearing
And then what I
that
call
out.
the first floor is the floor directly above that. So we
Right.
have a garage level, and then we
Right.
have a first I call living floor, which is living, dining, kitchen,
Uh-huh.
bedrooms in the back.
Right.
And then a second floor, which would be a single room, a master bedroom suite, as the second
Right,
floor.
I got the plans in front of me, I
Yeah.
just wasn't sure.
We're not lifting anything, everything's staying as is,
Okay.
and we're still underneath the maximum height allotment
Right.
for that area.
But by making the habitable area above that, then it meets FEMA requirements, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
We're above-
correct.
We're above FEMA, yes.
The top floor, the master bedroom floor, that deck, that's a deck coming out the front, correct?
Yes.
And does that line up with the main living area deck, or where does that come out to?
It does, it actually, believe it or not, there's a tiny encroachment on that side, so we're putting that back about 2 inches. So the deck will line up with the one below. The one below is an existing deck as it is, so we're gonna keep that deck. We're not gonna change that, but the second floor deck will be set back, I think it's like 1.5 inches or something to conform. Same thing with all new construction that we're proposing. Part of the building, remember, encroaches on one side by a fraction of a foot, 1 inch or 2.5 inches. But all new work is gonna be set back to meet that, at least the property line. There's no encroachment for any new work. And of course, the master bedroom on the second floor, that's all set back on all sides, front and sides.
And you had said, I apologize, I may have missed, you said there's plenty of space for the trash, there's a storage area?
Yes,
Where
in
was
the, in the
that?
ground, on the ground floor. Let's see. We have the legal parking spaces on the ground floor, and there's space at the back of the garage.
In the garage, because
In
I
the
was trying to
garage.
see how it would fit,
Yeah, back-
because it doesn't,
back.
you can't really access the backyard with trash, it wouldn't fit through, would it?
You have to go through the garage to get to
Through
the
the
front.
garage,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just to comment on that, Mr. Obelenis, you've got 4 legal parking spaces, but by using the garage door and the archway in front, the access for the trash is through the house underneath.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And there's plenty of access, as you can see on the plan, so there's no problem getting the trash where it would be stored out to the curb for pickup, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
John, the first floor deck, the front of that deck,
Is your mic on?
I don't know. And does the front of that deck, is that a negative, is that encroaching into the
Yes.
city
Yes.
right away or whatever you're saying?
Yes,
Yes.
By how much? By like a couple inches?
0.2 feet.
So, would it be that big of a deal just to like, at least cut that off so it,
Well, I thought, it's, I'm from builder to architect, I thought you have a 2x4 wall basically that's around the perimeter. And you're basically removing the wall. Then you're doing a tear down almost, because you can't shave a 2x4 into a 2x2 wall. That's what you're proposing. And unless the client decides to do a tear down, which he's trying to not do, he's trying to keep,
I'm not sorry, you tear down the whole house to shave off 2 inches?
well, 2 inches of a 2x4, what do you have left? You don't have anything left. You have
You
a
could build a
2x2.
wall inside the property line.
He's saying take that wall down and put another wall up 2 inches closer in, I think that's what you're saying.
I'm not,
Just the
yeah,
front.
I mean,
You don't have to
the only,
destroy the
in the
house.
front, the
wall.
only encroachment is the deck, right?
Well, no, it's the whole, it's the garage, the existing
front of the
building up there
house.
now, that
If
the
I understand you
garage
correctly,
level.
Mr. Richmond, are you saying not the first level here, but the above portion of this?
Right.
Pull this back in 2 inches?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I've already done that. I think that's new, if that's new work, I'm proposing any new work to meet the setbacks. I apologize. The
So
first
the-
floor wall itself, which is the garage wall, which we're actually removing most of it to create that arch, that's the piece of it that is existing and non-conforming, but any new work above that, the guardrail will be set back to
what
meet
he
that,
was asking.
that setback, if
So,
that's what.
to answer your question, Mr. Richmond, the work being done above the first floor wall
Right.
would be pulled back to conform. It's just the very front of the property, we can't do anything with that.
Right. I gotta look
The very front on the ground floor.
Correct.
Sidewall, that's the same
Really,
situation.
on the front, you have the
White
two
side.
front side walls that come to the front,
That's right.
also-
right? Why can't they be brought back in 6 foot and have columns in the front to open that up for air and light off the sidewalk? Because you come right to the sidewalk with the front walls. You know what I mean, Mr. Oberlin? If you could take 6 feet off the side walls and have columns to hold up the front of the porch. Do you know what so it becomes more of the sidewalk almost becomes doubled in width with a column in the middle of it, off the sidewalk property line.
So to allow us to support the,
Yeah, with a column on each corner,
yeah.
that's all open, and open on the side 6 foot back to the structure of the home.
That's a good point. I believe that since we're.
That would
moving-
open up for air and
Well,
light
you know
for the
what?
whole street, to
Thank
look
you.
up
You
and
know,
down.
I think you made me a better architect. No, because when you think about it, not to sound
You know what I
facetious,
mean?
but the fact that we're already moving a lot of the wall to create that arch, it seems like the next step would be actually to.
The way I show it here is like coming back 6 foot to your doorway with open air, open there, column in each corner. Correct. When you look down the street from the motel and everywhere, it's all wide up, and they have grass down the street a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my bad shoulder.
So for the purpose of a little more light and air is what you're saying? to
Yes,
create that,
immensely, it opens up the street to me.
Well, we can do that because we are removing most of the.
Does anybody else
arch
agree with
effects
that
and stuff.
on the board?
No.
No, I think that's a good idea. I like it.
The whole length of it.
It makes it safer backing up than you can see the side.
Yeah, it also makes it safer backing out because you can see down past that wall, which is right on the sidewalk.
That's what Barnhart just said. You guys think alike. That's, I don't know if that's good or bad.
Oh, good. That makes sense.
Okay.
That's-
Does the board have any other questions for Mr. Obelenis? Because Mr. Barnhart, Mr. West left.
Turn on your mic, Clem.
Do I understand that you're saving some of the existing walls, side walls?
All of the existing sidewalls, yes. On that
Are
first
they-
floor and the second living
Are
floor.
they fire rated?
That, I don't think they are. For now, they're all gutted. So we will make sure they're fire rated.
It's going to be terribly difficult.
On the inside,
You can't just do it from the inside. They're right on the property.
That's a building issue, right?
we would have to, right now, it's at, if I'm not correctly, it's gutted from the inside. There's nothing that's enclosing the walls on the inside. My client, I believe, is not here tonight, is going to replace the siding on the outside. When we do that, we'll make sure that we put in fire-rated materials like plywood on the outside skin.
There's no way you can replace the siding on the one that's right up against the building and to the ocean side.
It's inaccessible. I mean, there's not much we can do there, except from the inside.
Now, the one wall that's over the property line, that's going to remain?
Right now, that's our proposal, is to keep that.
The only on the ground level, the front portion of it, the portion of the new work is being cut back in slightly.
But the
But there's one
existing
wall-
wall that's over the property line is
There's
going
one
to
wall
stay
to the
there?
right side that is encroaching.
Correct.
On the right side.
It's the right side wall.
Can they do that?
Well, we're gonna keep, that's existing.
Somebody else's property?
It's not on someone else's property. It's actually.
In an easement.
I'm sorry. It's an easement.
The alley down the bay side of the house, that's belongs to the other property, right?
That's the easement that Mr. McLaren mentioned earlier.
And that,
Yeah. That's how the existing owner was accessing the rear yard.
and that's going to stay.
The easement will stay, but we won't need it for the access anymore because there'll be access through the underside of the house.
Not for a fireman.
Well, there'll be, correct, there'll be access through and there'll be access on the side.
But all new work is gonna conform. That was the issue, is that anything new to the side walls will meet the setback and will be rated, walls and stuff. But we set it back, there's a little angle you can see on a building elevation in front that shows that that will conform, that new work will conform.
It'll conform or it won't encroach?
Won't encroach.
Won't encroach, correct.
So, as Mr. Palmisano pointed out, we can certainly put the columns in And as Mr. Cristaldi pointed out, we'll clear out some space to make it easier to get in and out of the driveway. And with those changes on the ground floor level, the second floor, the first living space and the second living space will be as proposed by Mr. Obelenis.
So, Eric, what's the easement for?
The walkway on the side of the house.
Ingress and egress.
Who owns that property?
The property next door, it's a condo association, it's a 6-unit condo.
And the easement is in your favor?
The easement is to the benefit of the applicant. That's right.
Continue.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Obelenis?
Bring somebody else up.
Barnhart? Mr. Barnhart is going to testify regarding the planning purposes of this application, how they are satisfied. John is a licensed professional engineer, licensed professional planner.
I just got to swear him in when you're done. John, can you just state your name and address, please?
John Barnhart, office address is 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City, New Jersey.
And do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Mr. Barnhart's testified here many, many times. I would ask that you
We
accept his
accept his
credentials.
credentials.
Fine. All right. John, you were present, obviously, while Mr. Obelenis testified, and you had heard the questions that the board had raised regarding the construction. So can you please testify as a licensed professional planner and engineer how this application meets both the C and D variance requirements, and how this is the, what we believe to be, best possible option for this property, short of tearing it down?
Sure. Okay, as Eric already pointed out, we have a relatively unique situation right here, just down the street from City Hall. We are in the CBD zone, and we have a lot that is, it's only 26 feet wide. It has a depth of 62.5 feet, and has existed for many years with a ground floor commercial space and a residential unit above that commercial space. All around this property is fully developed, so there's no availability of other lands around the property. We're bordered by condominiums on both sides of the subject site. Although this is a CBD location, I'm sure everybody's familiar with how this block is developed. The avenues, being Atlantic Avenue and Ventnor Avenue, the corners have maintained as commercial spaces. Up on Atlantic Avenue, you have some newer development that maintain commercial space on the ground floor and built residential space above. As you get toward the center of this block, and I think there's a total of 8 of them actually, they are all just residential uses, other than maybe Evan Goddard's place right across the street next to the Wawa. The majority of that middle block area, not on the avenues, is just residential. So what we're faced with is we have a small lot. We have a lot of constraints with regard to your ordinance and your bulk area criteria, and we have a building that was substantially damaged by Sandy. So we're faced with a lot of hurdles in order to redevelop the site. So what Mr. Obelenis and our client set out to do was come up with what they thought was a very viable solution to bring the site up to standards with regard to FEMA requirements and up to standards with what the expectations would be for a nice property on, one of the most heavily traveled corridors between Ventnor and Atlantic Avenues. So what the proposal is to gut the ground floor, eliminate the commercial space, utilize that as you heard Mr. Obelenis explain, as a carport area, and I thought the board's suggestions with regard to the openness in the front were a good one from a safety standpoint and also from an air and light standpoint, and then develop a garage space to the rear, or to the back portion that will have a garage door, which will still then also leave interior space for storage of trash, recyclables, and bikes and surfboards or whatever the case may be. So what does that do? Obviously, it eliminates the commercial space, which is why an E variance is necessary here. But what it also does is it takes a property that has never had parking, when it went back way back when it was a viable commercial space together with residential space, it had no parking. We are reducing the intensity of this site with the elimination of the commercial space, because that obviously would no longer generate parking needs. And we are proposing 4 off-street parking spaces for the residential use. Albeit, we do recognize that we are going to lose 1 space on the street because we have to provide a curb cut. We are still, even if you subtract that out, we are still 3 spaces greater than the existing condition and reducing the intensity of the site. So I think that's a tremendous benefit for this small property to provide that parking on site. As Mr. Oberlin has pointed out, then on the upper floor is to renovate the residential structure with a small expansion toward the back, and then to provide a second living floor, but it would be at the 3rd level for a master suite. And that structure, and I think the front elevation, explains the front proposed elevation explains the building the best, I think. You can see how that top level expansion is pulled in to create a greater sense of openness at that upper level. So when you look at Mr. McLaren's report, and we agree with his analysis of the ordinance with regard to the CBD versus the S25 and what have you, it looks like there's a lot of variances being asked for. There are. I think it's 9 or 10 variances in total. But the reason for that is because we are in a CBD zone. This building was developed as a CBD building where the front, the side, the rear, the setbacks, they're all 0 in a CBD zone. Essentially how this building was initially built. So if you apply the CBD criteria, I think 5 or 6 of those variances drop out right away. But because we're getting rid of that ground floor commercial and we are just a single family home, it kicks us over to the residential criteria, the S25 criteria, and all of those elements become variances. From a planning perspective, I look at them as existing conditions, and Mr. Oberlandis and our client is trying to adaptively reuse this existing building and renovate it to bring it to a current standard. So I'll talk about the use variance first, because that's kind of the operative variance in an application like this. So how do we justify a use variance at this location? Well, I think that this is a case where this application promotes the general welfare. The reason I think that I can make that statement is because we are eliminating a ground floor space that was substantially damaged by Sandy. It is no longer compliant with regard to any FEMA criteria. And if you actually tried to develop that ground floor space again with commercial, as I'm sure you know, you do have options for floodproofing or what have you for commercial spaces. It would be a structure that would be required to be flood-proofed almost to the entire 2nd floor, because the ground elevation at this location is below elevation 5. As you saw in Mr. McLaren's report, the minimum finished floor elevation at this location, I believe, is 13. So you're talking about 8 feet of floodproofing. So it creates almost an impossibility with regard to penetrations, access, doors, windows. It becomes an area that is essentially impossible to construct. So just the physical location of the site creates a situation that the ground floor really can't be used for anything other than parking and storage reasonably. So that kind of, in our opinion, creates a situation where the site becomes particularly well suited for this single family use, especially given the surrounding buildings that are all residential on either side of us, do not have commercial at the ground floor. And then as you come toward Ventnor Avenue, you have a number of single-family residential units that have no ground floor commercial space as well. So we believe that the application does promote the general welfare because this site is particularly well suited for the use. The second special reason that we believe applies to this application is promotion of free flow of traffic. As I mentioned, we are providing 4 on-site parking spaces where none currently exist. We are also eliminating a use that has a parking demand associated with it, theoretically. In the commercial space, that use is proposed to go away. So this is a small lot that we are proposing to de-intensify with regard to traffic and parking, and for those reasons, we believe that special reason can be advanced. With regard to the negative criteria, as you're very well aware, there are 2 prongs to the negative criteria. The first is that there is no substantial detriment to the zone plan or the zoning ordinance. I mentioned already there are a great number of C variances that are essentially all existing conditions. They're only C variances because we got rid of the ground floor commercial space. Side yard setbacks are permitted to be 0 in the CBD zone. Front yard setback is permitted to be 0 in the CBD zone. So although as a single-family house, it sounds like we're asking for every variance under the sun, the actual building structure itself does, although the site is tremendously undersized, the building envelope itself does generally comply with the intent of how the CBD buildings are to be built in that zoning district. So for that reason, we believe there is no substantial detriment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance. With regard to substantial detriment to the public good, we think we've improved traffic and parking. We believe that we have improved trash and recyclables, because there currently, as it sits now, there really is no place to store trash or recyclables on that ground floor. We are opening up the rear yard by elimination of all those stair and deck structures, eliminating all of that and having only an access from the ground level. We are taking away all of that coverage in the rear yard. That rear yard will now be a grass and landscaped rear yard area. And we are taking a building that is currently completely non-compliant with all the FEMA standards and all the building code standards and bringing it up to compliance. So for all of those reasons, we believe that there is no substantial detriment to the public good.
And John, I was going to stop you real quickly.
Yep.
To your knowledge, the commercial that had existed along Washington Avenue has either been taken away through other variances and other applications where developments occurred. For example, across the street, 17 South Washington at one point was different than it is now. In fact, that property needed D variances to do almost the same thing. You and I were involved in that
Yeah, directly across the
application.
street, it was a three building project, multiple units, but there was a use variance in the CBD associated with the elimination of commercial on the ground floor.
To put parking on the ground floor to raise everything up out of flood harm's way, correct?
Correct.
And this particular building hasn't been occupied with any commercial structure for several years, both before and after Hurricane Sandy, correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
So the viability of some kind of commercial space along Washington Avenue, that area, other than Mr. Abbott's office, Mr. Goddard's office across the street, either they've failed and they've gone away via sheriff's sale, or they just have never existed.
Correct, and as a for example, Mr. Goddard's office sustained enough damage and required renovation to put it into a substantial damage situation or substantial, and that space would have to be eliminated or something would need, I mean, it's at that ground level, so.
So based on the flooding problems as well, eliminating the commercial, although it's changing the character of the CBD zone, by adding parking, getting everything up out of harm's way for flood purposes, serves an additional health, safety, and welfare purpose for zoning, correct?
It does, and and we've had a number of these applications on the side streets, and you never like to lose commercial, obviously, but this is a location. It's a 26-foot wide lot. It has a lot of development challenges to it, and trying to redevelop this, even if you tore it down, even if you had a clean slate piece of property, the reality is trying to develop a commercial space that's viable at that lower level. It's not.
Well, then there would be no parking, correct? If you did develop it for commercial, then there's no parking at all other than street parking for whatever that commercial use would be.
Correct.
Right.
Can I interrupt you here
Sure.
for that particular point? You know the board doesn't want to get rid of commercial properties around town, and we've
Correct.
always done everything we can. And you also know that there's certain areas in town, exactly like you're explaining, it's just not going to work. And we've tried and we've tried and we've tried, and it's out. But in this case, we have a whole plan, a whole pedestrian plan for Washington Avenue, a whole new plan. Blocked off at the end of the street out here, wider sidewalks with landscaping. It will be pedestrian from bay to ocean. We have a golf course going in where the bank building is. We have draws of many more people coming down there now, which makes the whole area on this side of Ventnor Avenue much more viable for commercial, maybe more viable. That'll be worthwhile flood-proofing a building. It's not the exact same situation. If it wasn't for this is where I'm hesitating, is with this whole new Washington Avenue plan, that it's not the same situation as some other ones where we've gotten rid of commercial. Can you address that? Because I think you're familiar with the plan I'm talking about.
The Washington Avenue piece I'm not so familiar with,
Okay.
Chairman, but I mean, what I would say to that is, I understand that, but I mean, in this specific block, realistically, again, because, I mean, the core, not on the avenues, but the core of this street, it's residential. I mean, so the idea of it changing over time, personally, I don't think is realistic with regard to all of a sudden having ground floor commercial along that area. I just,
For FEMA purposes or for commercial purposes?
for both,
or-
for both, for both the viability of a commercial use at that location, and also it's extremely challenging to develop commercial space in areas that are this low. I mean, it's, as you know, when we get floods, Washington Avenue is one of the worst spots in town.
And Mr. Patterson, I would further comment on that. I think that argument that you were making is great maybe a couple of years from now when it's in place. But as it stands now, it's just, he has tried to get somebody to come and look at it. No one wants to be anywhere near there. And the complaint is,
Why it went to sheriff's sale, I guess.
right, no parking, and there's just nothing you can do with it. If you were to rehab it, you have to rehab it for FEMA, and it makes it cost prohibitive. So probably 3 years from now, this application wouldn't be a good application, or 2 years from now, and all the other stuff's done. But as we sit here today, it seems like to us, it's probably the only viable.
Right, but we give it up today, we give it up forever, so
But
I'm just torn here, that's,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not,
and
I want you to address that issue.
I don't disagree with you, but I think, again, because of how this location sits today, with all the single-family houses you have clustered right there, it's not, I mean, unless you do some type of redevelopment plan and start acquiring these properties, the realism of those single-family houses all of a sudden having some kind of ground floor commercial or other space that
Well, is
would
it
work
20
with-
different owners in there, or what's?
Well, along this strip, you have 8 separate structures, all of which are single-family at ground level. Then you've got the condos.
All separate ownership?
All separate owners.
Yeah.
They're different structures. Then you have the 2 condos, the one that I believe you're part of, that's 4 units, correct?
Behind is 2.
And next door is 4.
I don't know what's next door.
So those are raised up, but that's residential a few feet up. The other properties along South Washington, as you go down towards City Hall and to Wawa, they're all ground level, multiple family residential, which I don't see how that ever gets changed to commercial, other than they
Well,
get.
no, it is commercial. You
But
don't
it's
see
not
it
built-
changing back to commercial.
Right,
You don't
but-
see those houses coming down and
Correct,
commercial
someone
properties
tearing them
going
down and building commercial properties in their place.
with condos on top.
I mean,
Can I chime in?
Yes, please, save me.
Being a builder and having to deal with trying to FEMA-proof a first-floor residential, I'm sure Jim would agree with me. If the first-floor walls are not masonry, it's virtually impossible to flood-proof a first floor. It's basically impossible to flood-proof a first floor.
Unless it was rebuilt, right? Or you
Unless it
mean
was rebuilt.
Right, yeah, it would have to, the
Then you
place
have to
being torn
rebuild it
down.
and build masonry walls. And,
Right.
Yeah, but otherwise, you can't really do it.
With this building, I'm saying on
With this
new
building.
construction, you could.
Excuse me.
With new construction, you
yeah.
could, yeah.
But with this building, no way.
Can I butt in on Mike? Over 50% on this, they're gonna have to use pilings. The only way I see it is helicals. And using helicals, we don't even know if there's a footing underneath that thing. I see it as a construction nightmare.
Yeah, but that's their.
I mean, to do, I understand that, but
Is that, huh?
I understand that, but I mean, where are we going here with it?
Well, I mean, the D variance is, I was reading, the criteria, and I just think that. it would
I'm
be
agreeing
a-
with you.
Oh.
Continue. I continue with what you were gonna say about the
I'm just
D
saying,
variance.
The criteria, I think that if we did not allow them to do this, then it would be a real hardship on the homeowner because it's virtually impossible to flood-proof the first floor and make it commercial. I just don't see how it can be done with a frame building. If the walls were masonry, believe me, I know all about it. I've done them in Ventnor, and
I understand what you're saying. My point is, it's not a viable project as it is, that it's a viable project to be torn down and commercial space put in there at some point. I'm not proposing this, I'm saying
Right.
that that's my question. At that point, it would be floodproof. This building obviously can't be floodproof
Right,
for commercial,
right,
but a new building could be.
right.
Okay, that's, okay, we're on the same page then, thank you.
I just want to clarify what you said. You said it would be a hardship on the present owner
Yes,
to make this,
to try to keep it
To
commercial.
try to
because
keep it
you
commercial.
you cannot,
Well-
my experience as a builder and dealing with this inventor is you cannot flood-proof a first floor if the walls are not mason,
But-
cinder block, whatever you want to call
but
it.
if you took the building down, it could be a viable
Correct. Yes,
commercial
absolutely.
space.
Yeah.
But this was purchased, wait, what? This was purchased by a contractor at sheriff's sale knowing full well what was there, so I don't see where a hardship is.
Not so much, Mr. Patterson, that it's a hardship.
No, go ahead.
But
Go
to
ahead.
say that the existing structure, as Mr. Richmond was pointing out, there's very little you can do with it other than what we proposed. Certainly, if it was torn down to the ground to start from scratch, there's a lot of options. But that was really never the intent. The intent was to do something with the existing structure, as ugly as it is and as bad as it is, changing it into something that would be what we believe to be a marked improvement. So short of tearing it down, I think what Mike was saying was, this is a viable option.
This is the only option if you don't
Right.
tear it down.
If you don't tear it down, we couldn't go to City Hall, and Mr. Galantino couldn't give us a building permit because we couldn't flood-proof it enough to meet FEMA standards.
Right.
So,
So this is your only option without tearing it down?
correct,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't see that as a hardship. I just, but I see what you're saying, right?
You made a good
Well,
point.
I don't think
Because
we're
when they
not
bought
claiming
the
it to be a
place-
hardship.
When they bought the place, they knew
Right.
that it was, you know,
Right.
Right.
yeah, so.
We're not saying that this would fall under
No,
hardship
he
standard.
did. He did, not you.
Oh, okay.
I'm-
We're just
I'm
saying that this is the,
right.
with what we've got, with working within this framework, literally, footprint, that this potential project is as good as we can do with this structure. If we left it, we can't do anything with the first floor commercial because we can't floodproof it. So trying to keep the existing structure, almost like a raise, as Mr. Clarn and I discussed, you know, if you're looking at it like a raise, you're stuck with what you've got. Making the best of what we got is the option. We're trying to put, you know, something nice on what otherwise isn't so nice.
All right. Can I just clarify one thing?
Sure.
I think you answered it, I don't want to assume. As far as satisfying your requirements for the use variance, you're not even attempt to tell us that it's an undue hardship, that you're essentially following under the carrying out a special purpose, you're saying that, or are you doing both?
Well, for several.
Well, I think with regard to the C variances, I think we can have.
Mike, please, John.
I think with regard to the C variances, we can justify those variances under a hardship condition because.
It's an undersized
Excuse me,
lot.
for the C.
Because if you apply all the setback requirements of an S-25, I did some quick math, you're looking at a building footprint of less than 600 square feet. I mean, if you apply the side yard, you apply the front and rear yard, you've got this little postage stamp of a space that you could build something. So I think that all the Cs can be justified under a C1 and a C2. From a D variance standpoint.
As with all the other 20-foot, 5-foot lots in town. So
Yeah.
yes, we understand.
From a D variance standpoint,
Is it the two you said, the general welfare and the free flow, or is it both you're trying to say?
no, I believe that the general welfare is advanced.
Right.
And I also believe that, that there is a promotion of free flow of traffic. And there's actually a third reason that I hadn't gotten into, and that's protection from flood, fire, and other natural man-made disasters, which is the purpose of zoning as it advanced here, because we are eliminating the noncompliance of a structure with regard to FEMA. And just one more quick mention, that we're talking about tear it down, not tear it down. From a planning perspective, even if you did tear this building down, it's my opinion that any would-be applicant would still be coming back in here with this building as a single-family house. At this location, with the size of this lot, given what's around it, I don't believe that this site is well suited for the use that's permitted there, being a low-level commercial space. We deal with it quite often, and yes, you can build a masonry wall building down there, but if you're talking about a retail structure that's going to have storefront windows and things, it becomes a real challenge to actually appropriately flood-proof a building like that when it is this low. It's a different situation when you're in a location that is elevation 8 or 9, or then you can get a couple steps up and a little handicap ramp because you have to be ADA compliant. You can set the building back a little bit, and you can make it work. You can get that floor up, and you can flood-proof maybe the first couple of feet, and then you get your windows going up from there. It works. Here we have a location that is ground elevation below 5. We have to be at 13. We have to flood-proof for 8 feet before we can even start doing anything. So there is no combination from a commercial standpoint, in my opinion, and this is really speaking as an engineer and a planner at this point, that works at this location. So that's why I argue that this site is particularly well suited for a commercial space with ground floor parking, the living space above, and it's not well suited for commercial.
You mean residential? You said residential.
I'm sorry, did I say
Yeah.
commercial?
Yes.
Residential, I'm sorry.
And John, you're obviously,
why Richie's smiling.
you are taking into consideration the board's comments. Mr. Obelenis had indicated earlier to open that front portion up with columns also increases the free flow of a view down
It
Washington
does.
Avenue.
That promotes air, light, and open space, and it also certainly promotes safety with regard to maneuvering in and out of the parking
the cars.
areas. Yes.
I have a question for John. John, what do you think about cribbing the building up? You're gonna have to, you're over 50%, you're gonna have to piling anyhow.
Well, we haven't, again, I haven't spoken, my client's a builder, and the inside is gutted out, and he needs to dig on the side of the foundation to see how far it goes down, if we're
Right.
below the frost elevation, things like that, see
Right.
what size the footing is. I don't think he's done that yet, as far as I know, because I've looked at the
I
floor.
mean, that
and
might
saw-
change the whole dynamic of this whole
Well,
thing.
I don't know. I think that it looks pretty solid. I mean, there's no cracking in the walls. It's a
Well,
pretty
you-
secure building.
Whether they're good or, if they're good, then you're still gonna have to put helicals on. You're not gonna get pilings in there.
If you have to put pilings at all, correct.
Right. And then you might as well crib the building up if you're doing that, and you might as well do the masonry. You know what I mean? It's, just from a builder's look at it,
Well, I don't know, other buildings adjacent to us have piles or not. If their footings are conventional footings,
that would be Jim,
you would answer that better than I could.
for the pilings. The boring and a whole bunch of other stuff just before we can even answer them.
Well, yeah, but that's all.
Wait. He's asking Jim a question.
Mr. Cristaldi, Mr. Galantino is not eligible on this application, so we'll keep him out of this.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jim.
Obviously, with regard to construction, he's gonna have to come in and get building permits. That's a little bit different.
I just wanted to.
And Mr. Galantino or Mr. McLaurin are gonna have to review the zoning and construction plans. But for purposes of tonight, we think that this is the best way we can make it work, short of tearing it down.
Is the person that bought the property here?
He is in the Outer Banks with Hurricane Maria remnants. He was supposed to come back yesterday and was unable to do so.
So was he aware, or I don't know if you can speak to this or not, but was he aware that when he bought the building it was in the CBD district and that we have a requirement for first floor commercial?
I don't know when he went to sheriff's sale what he was aware of or not.
Well, don't you think he should have been aware if he bought the building?
You know, you go to these sheriff sales, Mr. Richmond.
He was aware. He talked to me on the phone.
Okay, so Mr. McLaurin knows, yeah.
Okay.
If the board has any other questions or any other recommendations, aside from Mr. Palmisano, Mr. Cristaldi had indicated to open up that first level with columns, which we're agreeable to, we'll certainly listen. And that could be a condition of the resolution if in fact it goes through.
Anything else?
Not unless the board has any other questions.
Well, no, you can't yet. I'll let you later. That's number 2. 3 more, you're out of here. Anything else from the board? Excuse me? Any other questions from the board? Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and be sworn in? Please come forward, ma'am. Your turn.
Just state your name and address, please.
Jeanette Buck.
Pull the microphone down.
Jeanette
There
Buck,
you go.
23 South Adams Avenue, Margate. My property is behind the
Wait.
property that's...
Just please raise your hand, and do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Well, I had a question about a rear fence, but I don't think we're at that point yet.
You can ask it.
So, I was just curious if they were planning a fence between the two properties, my property and theirs. But everything I've heard now about the commercial versus the residential, this property has been a mess for many years now. If you don't make it residential at this point, no one is going to go in there as commercial. So it's going to stay the way it is. It's been, I think, 7 years maybe this way. A long time. It's been a mess. So that's kind of something. I hear everything you're saying. I mean, I raised my house behind this house, so I dealt with the flooding. I was hit by the hurricane, and what's going to happen to it? I mean, if you don't, I understand you don't want to lose the commercial part of it, but no one's going to use it. So you have a hard decision to make.
John, could you answer her question? Is there a fence along the back property line?
Right now, we don't show a fence, but that would be an intention on applying to put a fence in. That's going to protect this property from landscape area back.
Could you use the microphone, please, Jeff?
No.
No.
Sorry. Yes, we don't show it graphically on the plan here, but my guess, my client's not here now, but I would suggest that we do put a fence in the back
Okay.
to make us good neighbors.
And all that wooden structure's coming down. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yes, that's, because that's all dilapidated and stuff, so we're going to remove it. We're not going to replace it or anything. It's going to be a clean facade at the back.
And then are we required, because of the easement, to have a gate there for access to the side there? That was my other question. Something to, because I think there has to be like they have to access that.
Whatever you
so-
need access to, we'll give.
I
That's
think
not
it's
an
for the, I think it's for the township, so I just wanted to be sure.
Does
If
that
that's
easement go from
required,
from street to street?
doesn't.
It
goes
goes,
from the back of the property, doesn't go street to street. It stops at one point at the end of the
it stops about 3/4 of the way back on 23 South Adams Avenue on the side of my property.
Okay.
So when it's required, that will be put in also.
That was my only concern with.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else care to comment? Have any questions about the application? Public portion is closed. You'd like to say something, Eric?
Yes.
Please.
Just in hearing the board's comments, trying to get a feel for what is and what is not more important, is the board's idea that this property itself should come down and start from scratch? Or is it a better way to make this one work? Because the client is certainly willing to work with the board to make this work. I just don't think taking it down to the dirt is going to be a viable option,
Eric,
and then we're left
this
with what
is-
we've got.
I mean, I'm very torn on this. This is such an easy application to approve. But we have this plan, and this hurts that plan, and the plan is not here yet. And
Right.
we have to look to the future, and it's tearing me. This is,
But understanding that, and I certainly live in town, I understand the plan and how good it could be. The question becomes, what happens if it's not approved? That
if this
if this
project.
plan's not approved, now you've got a bad project in the middle of your plan. And but for the city exercising eminent domain to start taking properties along this street, tearing them down and doing something else, then the plan, in my opinion, is worse because you've got the golf course and the free flow of traffic, and someone's going to walk by and say, that's the eyesore that's been here.
Well, that now becomes a more viable property. That's what would happen with the new development on Washington Avenue.
Understanding that, but when does that
Right.
happen?
That's the problem.
Now you're left with an eyesore. Is it better to have an eyesore for several years that looks great for a long time, or loss of the commercial now and a new structure that's built which looks good, you just don't have your commercial there? I don't know the answer to that. But I think ultimately, short of tearing it down, then the eyesore remains, and I don't know what the client does to
Yeah,
make
well, you've come to that. It's not viable as commercial property without tearing it down, so
Yeah.
you're doing the only thing that can be done at this point with that property.
Correct.
Okay,
Making
I get that.
And I appreciate you saying that this would be the best possible option with this property. And as Mr. Cristaldi said, you may have to there might have to be some construction methods that are used that make it viable in this zone. whether it's cribbing it up, whether it's checking to see if the masonry goes down, which obviously before they do any building, they're going to have to check on that. But I think right now we're more concerned about, does this zoning plan work, and what's the option if it doesn't work? We don't want to come back and say, okay, we've tweaked it just a little bit, and here's some different change to the structure, because if it's a change to the structure, the applicant's willing to do that. It sounds like the board's concern is the losing of the commercial.
The plan, I mean, look, my word, not the board's word. I mean, for this project, if it weren't for what could be coming, you've added 3 spots, you've flood-proofed the building, you've cleaned it up for the nice neighbor lady there, so it's.
And respectfully to the board, and Mr. Manos certainly want his opinion on this, you are pretty much bound by the time of application rule, which is today's zoning is not the zoning you're talking about.
That's true, but it's central business district today.
Correct.
And we don't like to lose central CBD, so that offsets that argument a little bit, so it still leaves me
Correct.
torn. How should I vote?
Well, I would say you should vote yes, but that's up to you and the other board members. The applicant will work with the board regarding the actual construction. With regard to losing the commercial, there's nothing we can do about that. So, we came in with a plan that we think works. To the extent the board, and they always have good ideas, can tell us something more than Mr. Cristaldi, Mr. Palmisano, opening up that ground level.
Did you agree to open the sidewalls? You did?
Yeah.
And that would be 6 feet to equal the upper structure of the front of the building.
Correct.
Okay.
What was that, Craig?
Approximately 6 feet on both sides of the side
Correct.
walls.
Mr. Obolenis can make that work. So if the board does see fit, that would be a condition of the resolution which we would comply with. Aside from that, I don't think the board's made any other recommendations other than they'd like to see it stay commercial. We can't do that.
Anything else from the board? Desmond?
We would also, as a condition, I'm sorry, Mrs. Buck, is it? Comply with her request for whether it's the open fence or whatever we're going to do, we'll work with her on that.
A legal fence?
Yeah.
Desmond?
How does this work now if a member is leaning towards what I think you're thinking is not losing that commercial? We can't really, there's not really a split vote here. It's either, if we're against the use, then it's a non-issue as to all the other issues.
Correct.
All the other variances.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Right, I would ask if the board's going to vote, you might as well just do it all at once, which is,
Yeah.
if it's the D goes through, then I would assume the board will have some conditions of the C, as Mr. Palmisano and Mr.
Yeah,
Riccardi
that was
indicated.
my point.
If the
The
D
C's not a
doesn't
problem.
occur, the Cs
Right.
are
Moot, right.
irrelevant.
Eric, can you address briefly, are you asking the board to grant negative to encroachments?
No, they can't grant on the encroachment. That's something that would be a condition of the resolution we would have to deal with the city or eliminate the construction. Eliminate the encroachment.
So you're asking for a zero variance as opposed to a negative
Correct.
0.2 variance?
Right.
On the side as well?
That's right.
Okay.
And this board doesn't have jurisdiction. As Mr.
And then
Mr.
you get
McCartney-
the license from the city.
And if we don't, it doesn't get built, or Mr. Obolenis has to figure out how to make a 2x4 into a 2x2.
I think if you're pushing that back area open back, you can eliminate the front encroachment, in my opinion.
Does that cover everything if we take that out?
Not the side encroachment.
As long as you're not constructing anything new across the,
With the front, if you're gonna support the front with columns.
Speaker, please. Microphone.
Since we're gonna support the front with columns, you can just set the columns back inside the property line.
correct.
And but since we've agreed to cut those walls back 6 feet, so that essentially that second level deck is gonna look like a deck just supported by columns when we're done, that deck can be shaved back those couple of inches as well. So the encroachment will be gone in the front, just by virtue of the modifications we're making.
I agree.
It's really just an agreement that needs to be made with the adjacent property at this point.
For the easement.
Yeah, and that's not really, as you know, that's not something that the board
Okay.
has to deal with.
I would like to remark in regard to the floodproof, and if it's a mixed-use development, if you maintain the commercial below and put residential above, just from past experience, to floodproof a structure, masonry or not, at 8 foot is a challenge. I mean, you have to sign off on it by a structural engineer that the floor is not going to float for 8 feet. I mean, and it also would put a hardship on the second floor, the residential use, if they have a mortgage, or even if the commercial space has a mortgage. The insurance could be substantially high, floodproofing or no floodproofing. I just think that's something that could be considered.
Thank you. I mean, I think that further goes to the heart of the application, which is being, sorry. You want to interrupt me? You can interrupt.
In the microphone, please.
With regard to the future plan, Chairman, I would fully understand that a pedestrian linkage between the beach and Atlantic Avenue and Ventnor Avenue and all the way down to Amherst Avenue, beautification of the pedestrian way makes a lot of sense. But I think from an elevation standpoint, a realism standpoint, a constructability standpoint, this block, these ground floor commercials don't work. I mean, that's my opinion. So I haven't seen that plan, and I think this is a great spot for a pedestrian linkage of all those elements. But I don't think that going through this block and having them be commercial spaces works well as part of that plan.
Because of the low elevation.
Because of the constructability of it, correct.
And, the proof's in the pudding. There isn't any there now. There may be in the future, many years from now, but right now, there's no viable first floor commercial space along that walking area.
Just take away the whole CBD zone on that block, I guess, I mean.
Well, that's what they're trying
Right.
to do.
Not the whole.
Okay, all right, you done?
I am.
Anybody else? Okay,
I think before we frame a motion, if Roger and Eric and the rest of the board could maybe flip to page 3 in Roger's report so we can run through these, make sure we're on the same page because there's a lot of them. Just number 1's the use variance, okay. Roger, number 2, are we applying the 4,000 square feet or the 2,500 square feet? I realize it's existing nonconformity, but just for purposes of framing the motion.
It's the 4,000 square feet applies to lot.
To the lot area. And is that the same with lot width on the other page? I know you have 3 and 4, you have them both
Yes.
listed. So we'll stick with the CBZ. They're existing nonconformities. It's really a non-issue.
That's the zone it's in, and that's the physical dimensions of the land.
Gotcha. And then
which will not change.
number 5, Eric, is that going? That's going to be a zero? That's going to be a 0-foot setback requirement.
Correct.
Same with number 6. Number 7, the side's going to be 0 on the bay side and 0.6 on the beach side. So number 8, that combined would actually be
0.6.
0.6. Building coverage is fine. And now 10 and 11, did we resolve those?
So the exact percentage,
Right.
Mr. Robelenis hasn't calculated, but the area right now where it says landscaped area is 0, the entire backyard will be landscaped. So,
vegetative landscape.
correct. What do you?
I calculated that would be 26% landscape covers the rear yard.
There's
Okay.
no room for landscaping in the front, correct?
No.
Right, okay.
So that's still 0 then?
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Doesn't count.
That doesn't count.
We could put
Okay. And then the conditions will be the opening up of the front with the columns as discussed on the record and the fence in the rear yard.
That's correct.
Okay. I can frame the motion whenever we're ready.
So we're eliminating the encroachments. We're eliminating the 0 landscaped area. Now there will be some percentage, as Mr. Barnhart calculated. Still a variance, however.
Right.
But it's not 0% landscape
But in the
coverage.
front yard, it's still 0.
Correct.
I think, Eric, you and John need to address number 12. I mean, it's self-explanatory, but I think you need to be on record for that.
Yeah, that it's a hardship for the reasons Mr. Balanson said in the previous application. But they should say it. Right.
No, it's the other page.
One street tree. One street tree.
The variance.
Street tree or the external wall?
The distance between the buildings, I think, is what.
Yes.
Didn't you say they could have one street tree?
It looks like it could, yes.
One street tree.
Correct. We'll put in a street tree. Absolutely. So, she wanted a Bradford pear. We'll give her a Bradford pear. Mr. Barnhart, do you want him to address the issue between 10 feet is the minimum and we've got 1.8 and 4.8? Those existing conditions?
Yes.
John, can I ask you to use a microphone, please?
Can you get me like one of those things I can put on my? Similar to all the other variances that we already talked about, it's the same situation. The variances are existing conditions. We're not proposing to change them. And for those reasons, we believe that they're justified under both under the C1 criteria as well.
Keeping the existing conditions as they are, correct?
Yes.
Okay. With that, we rest.
And
thank
I
you
believe
for your
Roger
time.
said that even if this property was compliant, you'd still violate that provision, correct?
Correct. Unless it was commercial, and then it complies.
Right, because there's zero,
It's allowed.
correct, in the CBD zone.
All right, we need a motion for D, use variance approval to permit a residential use in the CBD zoning district where residential uses are not permitted, together with the following C variance relief. Lot area of 1,625 square feet, where 2,500 square feet is required. A lot width of 26 feet, where 50 feet is required. A front yard setback to the porch/deck of 0 feet, where 5 feet is required, or the prevailing setback of 13 feet is required, and a 5-foot minimum is required. A front yard setback to the building of 0 feet, where 13 feet is required. Side yard setback of 0 feet to the bay side of the property, and 0.6 feet to the beach side of the property, where 5 feet is required. A combined yard setback of 0.6 feet, where 10 feet is required. Building coverage of 71.77%, where 40% is the permitted maximum. Landscape area of approximately 26% total, where 35% is required. A front yard landscape area of 0%, where 60% is required. And the minimum distance between external walls of the building on our property and the main buildings of the properties on each side of 1.1 feet and 4.8 feet respectively, where 10 feet is required. And the following conditions will apply. The applicant will open up the front of the building with columns as discussed on the record. The applicant will install a compliant fence along the rear property line, and the applicant will plant 1 street tree. And 5 affirmative votes are required to pass this application.
Just one point of clarification, Mr. Manos. You had indicated that residential is not permitted in the CBD zone. It is just only with commercial below.
That's
as a clarification.
Residential, standalone residential is not permitted in the CBD zoning district, correct?
It's not permitted on the ground floor.
If I hear that motion,
I'll second
Mike?
the motion.
Pinky?
Clem Wasleski,
Well, with this site, it's impossible to build anything on it that would really meet the requirements of our ordinance. So obviously some kind of unique design solution is needed to provide a desirable project. But what I see here is just an attempt to put as much on this minuscule lot as possible. And the only positive thing I can say about the project is that it does remove an existing eyesore. I do note that on Roger's report of the 20 items noted, 11 of them require variances. Now, I think the applicant is just asking too much of the city of Margate and giving back too little. I vote to deny the application.
Mike Cristaldi?
I wish we had more information on this about footings and what could be done and everything else. I think we're jumping the gun giving up commercial in this area because we think we can't do. I don't think we've looked enough to see what we can do to make it work. And if we give it up, we're not getting it back. It's just not gonna happen. I'd love to see this building fall down. Then we wouldn't have to argue about it. But I can't see giving up the commercial just yet because of what our plans are in the future with the avenue. I think there's other ways of going about it, but you need to do a little bit more investigation of how architecturally to do it. My vote is no.
Rich Patterson?
I'm still torn. Mr. Goldstein, please don't take offense at this, but I don't think there's another attorney in the state that could have convinced me to vote yes, and I think you've done that, so.
I'm not sure that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'll take it.
In spite of Mr. Barnhart's testimony, I think you've convinced me that this would be an impossible project other than what's here, so I vote yes.
Well, thank you. We just hope the 4 other people go the same way.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I understand that there are many hurdles and many restraints with this project. The concessions that you've made to the air and space and to create parking and of course FEMA compliant is a positive. I can see where some of the hardships for the C variances are justified. It is an eyesore. I'd like to keep the integrity of the CBD zone. I'm afraid that it's almost as if we're going to remove the entire Washington Avenue CBD zone and the pedestrian walkway planned. I'm not convinced that there's a sufficient special reasons for this. I think that it doesn't really promote the general welfare. And as Clem said, I think there's a better design solution. Whether it be commercial or residential, there's a better design solution. So I have to vote no.
Craig Palmisano?
I hear my other board member concerns, but this building is not being torn down, it's being rehabilitated. It sure does need it. This building really needs it. It's been like this for 7 years, the woman said, empty. The rear yard is improved on it. I think there's a lot of positives to this. It's becoming more flood compliant with the removal of downstairs. There's residential on both sides of this building, on that side of the street, all the way to Wawa. Also, with the removing of the front walls back for more air and more light, I appreciate that, and I think that's well needed. And there's a lot of pre-existing variances that are non-conforming, you can't do anything about, and I think it's okay for the block, and I'm going to approve it.
Remy Pelosi?
What did Craig vote?
Yes.
Thanks.
I agree with Ms. Gubernalty with regard to, I think it's a good design, and I think the fact that all the variances would be eliminated if it was residential, but it's not. Unfortunately, I can't approve it because it's commercial, and I'd like to see commercial at some point come back and not be totally eliminated from Washington. So I can't vote for it. Sorry.
Mike Richmond?
We had a neighbor speak who's directly adjacent to the back of the property, right? So, and you're staring at an eyesore for the last 7 years, and it could be another 7 or 8 years before, you know, I think really for the general welfare of the neighborhood, I think the property should be rehabilitated. I also like the idea that there's going to be some off-street parking. I understand about losing the commercial, but 3/4 of the block is residential. So I'm going to vote yes.
The application does not pass. It's 3-4.
Next case is Nelson and Lauren Verbit, 437 North Thurlow Avenue, Block 520, Lot 16.03, in the S40 district to grant a C variance for total landscaping, front yard landscaping, building height, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Is anyone recusing? Pinky, are you in on this one? Okay. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. My report is in front of you in regard to 437 North Thurlow Avenue. We're seeking C variances, and this is the Planning and Zoning report. Background, the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct a new waterfront single-family dwelling within the S40 zoning district. Several variances are required to construct the dwelling as proposed, and they are listed below. You see my zoning chart. Highlighted in yellow are the variances. You see my documents reviewed on page 2. Section 3 on page 3, the variances required are as follows. Front yard landscaping, whereas required percentage to be landscaped is 60% and 57.4% is required. Total landscaping, whereas 35% is a required percentage of the total lot to be landscaped, and 31.5% is proposed. Building height, whereas 28 feet from BFE plus freeboard or elevation 13 is the permitted maximum, and 29.52 feet is proposed, which is a C variance. My comments are as follows. The front steps can be a credit towards the front yard landscaping, provided that the area of the steps is equivalent to the difference in area required to comply. The front steps can also be a credit towards the total landscaping, provided that the area of the steps is equivalent to the difference in area required to comply. The building height would comply if measured from the finished floor, but the height variance is being driven by the off-street parking proposed in the garage below the building. The variance plan shows a height variance request for the elevator shaft being higher than the roof, which would be a D variance. However, the plans have been modified to eliminate this variance request. So if you're looking at the plans and you see the D for the height for the elevator shaft, that has been addressed and eliminated. The lot is partially in the riparian zone. The mechanical platform is presumed to house the AC units with possibly a generator and complies. Pool equipment location needs to be identified on the plans and comply with the setback requirements, which is 10 feet from the side yard and rear yard. The floor areas are not shown on the plans and should be clearly shown. The plans do not show the required 6-foot fence for a pool or spa. The lot is currently vacant and was previously subdivided. A soil erosion and sediment control plan and permit shall be submitted to the construction office. The elevation of the deck needs testimony and needs to be provided on the site plan. Ordinance allows for the deck to be 20 inches above BFE, or in this instance, 12 feet plus 1.67 feet, which is 13.67 feet. And it is clearly shown on the elevations, but it should be shown on a plan itself too, on a site plan. The plans do show the locations of the proposed utilities. The recommendations, to highlight the important one in this application, will show the location of the pool equipment, add the required construction details, and show the public improvements, if any. Show the location of the required fencing, provide the floor areas of all the floors, provide the dormer areas for the third floor, if any. And that concludes my report for this application.
Good evening, Brian Callahan of the law firm Callahan Thompson Thompson on behalf of Nelson and Lauren Verbit. Going to take Mr. Bailenson comments in the beginning. We're eliminating the 2 landscaping requirements. We're going to be complying. Mr. McLeese will walk you through that. We are going to ask the board to add 1 variance tonight. Mrs. Verbit, who is throwing Mr. Verbit under the bus, would like a double elevation on the rear deck. So the pool would be at the elevation 13.67, which is correct. She was concerned about the kids going out and down 3 or 4 steps to get to the deck, so she would like to raise a portion of the deck 14 inches, so it's like 1 step out the door to get to the deck, and then the portion going down would be 1 step to the pool going down. So that...
Could you show that on the plan?
Mr. McLeese will go over it on
All
the
right.
plan. But so we're eliminating landscaping, adding one rear deck. The height stays the same. I have Mr. McLeese, I have Mr. Barnhart, and I have Mr. Verbit. Why don't I have them all sworn, and then if you have any questions, they can just jump in and answer.
Sure. Why don't you each and use the microphone? Each state your name and business address.
William McLeese, Architecture, 5 MacArthur Boulevard, Summers Point, New Jersey.
John Barnhart, office address 400 North Dover Avenue, Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Nelson Verbit, 360 Ian Court, Sellersville, Pennsylvania.
And each swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Thank you.
Mr. McLeese.
Yes, sir.
Qualifications from Mr. Patterson, or am I good?
Acceptable.
Why don't you go ahead and walk them through the site and get them started as to exactly what we're planning to do?
Sure. Existing site, as you know, is on Thurlow Avenue, 437 North. It's currently a vacant lot, 60 feet wide, roughly 69 feet deep, I believe, to the bulkhead. We're proposing a new single-family residence. The reason that we're here tonight is because we're elevating above what the minimum or the maximum requirement is for the first floor so that we can provide parking underneath the building. Just to orient you, this is Thurlow Avenue. Obviously, the docks and the bay up to the top of the page. We have entry walk with a stair. We have a driveway into the garage space, and then we have parking in the side yard here. The ground floor is largely storage. There's a small cutout area for a shower and changing space. And then we have a small foyer area with a stair and elevator. To take you through the building, at the first floor, which is accessible from the main stair up to a porch, brings you into a foyer area, same stair and elevator. And then we have a large open plan living area oriented towards the bay, where we have living, kitchen, and dining. So we spoke briefly about the deck in the introduction. We have the deck area here, oriented here, as you can see, pool area with a sun shelf in the pool. The area that we're talking about elevating is this portion, so that you'd be able to come out from the dining room 1 step down to this, and then step thereby down to the 1367 elevation.
As opposed to leaving the entire deck at the pool level?
Correct.
And what's the problem? Too many steps down?
The problem with that is if we were to leave the entire deck at the pool elevation, we would be required to have a landing and stairs, which would eat up the deck that we have. So we'd be limited in the amount of table space, chair space that we would have on the deck due to landings and stairs.
And how far is the difference between the elevations?
The
1 step?
lower level is 1367. We're proposing the top be 10 inches higher, 1433.
Is that 2 steps, 1 step?
2 steps. 2 risers, 1 tread.
Right.
So that keys you into the deck change that we spoke about. The equipment.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Is it 1 step down from the house to the deck?
Correct.
Okay.
So it would be 1 step out the sliders, a
Got
step
it.
of 6
Okay.
inches down to the deck. We spoke about the equipment platform, which you see here. That is for the mechanical equipment. For the house, the condensers, that complies with the ordinance. Moving through the house, we get to the second floor, which you see here. Again, deck oriented towards the front. bedrooms along this side, bathrooms, as you can see, stair and elevator, and a modest rear deck facing out towards the bay. Going up to the half-story, the habitable attic, you'll see here, stairs and elevator again, and then small bedrooms with basically open space and a bathroom. There's a 3-foot deck at the 3rd floor, which is looking out towards the bay, which I believe is also included in the application, but is permitted in the zone. So taking you through to the exterior, you'll see here, elevation facing the street. We're trying to keep everything light, black windows, white siding. We're playing with different roof materials right now, but generally this gives you the look and feel of the property. Again, you'll see the section cut through the pool and the configuration we're looking to achieve here at the rear, and the side yards with windows as they're located, and stairs down from the deck and the pool.
Walk them back through the landscaping to show
Sure.
where we weren't complying and what
So-
we've added to make us comply.
Correct. So we had proposed a landscape frontage of 57.2%. What we were able to do is add in the green space between the parking on the side and the main drive, and that allows us to comply. That brings us to a total of, excuse me, 65.6%. So we would comply with that requirement. Doing that, as well as cutting the paving back to the 9-foot required for parking and eliminating some of the paving at the rear, also allows us to comply with the overall landscape requirement. So both of those variances would go away.
Do you still have 2 parking spots outside?
We have 2 parking spots outside and 2 parking spots inside.
We're required to have 3, we have 4 on-site parking.
That's correct. 3 would be required, as is shown in the report. We're proposing 2 indoor and 2 outdoor. I know there's been some subject of discussion regarding the space out in the front. The setback from the property line to the building is 13.6 feet. When you factor in the offset of the garage door and the fact that there's approximately 2 feet between the property line and the back edge of the sidewalk, we're dealing with in excess of 16 feet from the back side of the sidewalk to the garage door. We're not proposing to put a parking spot there, but I know there's been some concern about it. Our thought was to get as many cars indoors and protected as possible. We're trying to preserve the storage space that's there for water toys, basically jet skis and the like, that's going to be used for the bay.
While we're on that area, I do have a big problem. So you're telling me your clients promise they will never park in that spot and block the driveway?
I'll let my
That's not
client who's
acceptable.
sitting
Well,
right
that's
here-
not acceptable to me, even if they said that.
Okay.
And to me, and it's not a variance, so I have nothing to say. I can't say you can't do that.
I understand. We did
If you look
consider-
at the house next door, they set the garage door back in, and the car fits there. And I
Right.
pulled in there, and I barely fit there. So I don't see how that spot that's inviting a parking spot there, it's inviting anybody that goes to that house to park there. I don't see how that's not going to be parked in.
The concern was, number one, if we were to push the garage door back to the 18 feet.
Just the garage door, not the building.
Right. If we push the garage door back the 18 feet, we won't have the space for the additional spot inside. So we'll
But you'll
actually,
have one outside.
we'll be putting an additional car outside into the elements. Aside from that, it takes away from the storage space for jet skis and the like that would be otherwise put in there. So we're losing storage space as well. If the door was pushed back, we would end up with an arrangement that would give us 1 spot inside in the garage, 1 spot outside, which by your ordinance is only 1.5 spaces, whereas right now we're proposing 4, we would be back to 3.5. So
We would have 3.5 that you would be parking 4 cars in. You're only required to have 3.
Correct.
So you're still meeting the requirements, but you would have 4 usable spaces. You're just speaking definitions at this point.
That's true. That's absolutely true. Obviously, our preference is to try to keep the 2 cars in the garage.
Front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks for view corridors and everything else is all maintained?
That's correct. The front yard meets the requirement within 200 feet. The side yards are each 11 feet. The rear yard is over 13 from the bulkhead to the face of the building. So all those items comply. The deck complies with the deck requirements. There was a note about the pool equipment. The pool equipment is going to be located under the deck. So 10 feet from the rear yard, 10 feet from the side yards.
Height-wise, we're We're over, but we're within what the parameters are coming up for the new master plan?
Correct.
And once again, elevator, a variance was eliminated because we've tucked it into the roof?
Sure, let's just look at the elevation again for that. Initially, we were proposing an elevator penthouse. We were able to find a manufacturer that was able to work within the criteria that we had here, so we're able to keep the elevator underneath the ridge and within a dormer.
Mr. McLeese, what's the roof pitch?
The roof pitch is 712.
Perfect.
I don't have any other questions, Mr. McLeese. I was going to call Mr. Barnhart, unless the board has additional questions. John? John, let's just quickly go over the variance relief and put on some justifications why we think that variances can be granted from both a positive and a negative criteria.
Sure. As Bill already pointed out, we've kind of pared down the request pretty dramatically this evening by eliminating both the landscape, front yard landscape, and overall landscape coverage variances. What we're left with is two variances. One is related to the rear deck elevation, which Bill explained, I think, in detail, and then the height variance, which is the subject of an upcoming zone change, as we understand it, and our proposal will comply with what the intention is of the new ordinance. But just talking about the deck for a moment, the deck elevation is such that the proposal is to have one area that you step down one step onto a deck, and then you would step down a couple more steps into the pool area. Obviously, it makes it more comfortable for the users of the home, and with regard to small children, it's obviously a safer condition. But with a deck like that, what we look at from a planning perspective is the negative impacts, because that's really what the issue is here. And if you look at how it's been constructed, the level that, or it's proposed to be constructed, the level that is proposed to be higher is kept completely within the building footprint. There is no request for any deviation with regard to the side yard. So you do have a full 11-foot side yard, open corridor side yard, all the way out to the bulkhead. That deck is cut back right to the bulkhead itself. There is no deck going out beyond the bulkhead, so it's really self-contained right to the rear of the proposed structure. So based on that, we believe that it does not create any air, light, and open space issues, and we do not believe that it creates a negative impact on the neighboring properties. With regard to the height, I kind of already touched on that, but we are proposing to be just under 30 feet above our floor. We are proposing, or Mr. McLeese is proposing, a 712 pitch. We believe that that is in compliance with the direction that this board and the city of Margate is going with regard to height. And again, it's because it's less than 2 feet in deviation from the existing ordinance, which we believe is very minor in nature, and it's really just a function of trying to have appropriate parking, height, and storage at that ground level based on the existing ground elevation, which is what is pushing the finished floor up a little bit. Just to quickly touch on the garage topic with the front setback, Mr. Patterson has shown some real concern with that, and we fully understand that. Mr. Verbit would like to have a two-car garage. I mean, it's not an unusual circumstance to have a two-car garage. Some of the things we looked at is, not that we need to go back to the drawing board, but if you did a side-by-side garage so you can have two cars and push it back, it makes your garage door almost 50% of the front of the house. It changes the whole look of the house. We think from an aesthetic standpoint, it isn't nearly as nice as what Mr. McLeese has developed. When you apply the front yard setback requirement and the rear yard setback requirement, and then you apply the thickness of the walls of the building, you get, basically you end up at just under 37 feet. You have just enough space to have a two-car parking garage, which is what Mr. Verbit is trying to achieve. So that's the reason for the layout that it is. I understand there is that potential for a car to park there.
Excuse me, potential?
Yes. If a car does choose to park there, number one, and obviously it's a code enforcement issue, but I recognize that people aren't going up and down the street to see if a car is parked and hanging over the sidewalk. What we looked at, and what Mr. McLeese was talking about from a practical nature, is that if a car does park in that location, what is the real ramification of it? And Mr. McLeese did talk about that with the position of the garage door and the position of the back of the sidewalk. There is approximately 16 feet, actually 16.1 feet there. the way that, if you look at what an average car size, and we looked at this today, like an Audi A6, for example, is 16 feet long. So, would you have a question?
Well, let me shorten this.
Sure.
While we're on the subject, would you consider moving the garage door in, or are you going to keep your application with the garage door where it is? It's up to you. We have no jurisdiction. We can't make you do that. So I would like to know, would you consider moving the garage door back and amending your application?
Right now, the answer is no.
Okay.
We have the 4 on-site parking spaces. We believe it. To move the garage door back creates.
That's fine.
We lost the space.
The answer is, you didn't lose a space. You still have 4
No, we
spaces.
lose an inside space.
Well, Mick Jagger once said you don't always get what you want.
Well,
Okay.
Okay.
I'll end that discussion then.
Thank you. Anyone else?
nothing further. Open it up to the board if they have any other questions.
Any questions from the board? Is there anyone here from the public that would like to comment or have questions on this? Public portion is closed. Any other comments from the board? If not, Leo, would you read the motion?
Sure, and Brian, you're okay with any of the conditions and recommendations and comments set forth in Roger's report?
Yes, we've gone over Roger's report. We're agreed.
Okay, we need a motion for C variance relief to permit a height of 29.52 feet where 28 feet is permitted, and to permit a portion of the rear deck as represented by the applicant to be elevated to 14.33 feet where 13.67 feet is permitted. And the conditions would be those set forth in Mr. McLaren's report dated September 25th, 2017, unless otherwise addressed or modified tonight.
I'll make that motion.
Tom and Jim?
Tom Collins?
It's glad to see you get rid of 2 variances. The Bayside deck variance really doesn't bother me. I think safety and pools and bulkheads are both. We used to be that we had people go down 3 and 4 stairs just to get to a lower deck by a bulkhead, which I didn't like. I think Mr. McLeese has done an excellent job in designing this house. It's, when I drove by and then I look at your plans and I went by Carmen's, and it fits right in with the neighborhood of what that pattern is. It's going to be really nice. I agree with Rich, but I trust that Rich will drive by every week, and if somebody's parked over the sidewalk, call the police and get rid of it. But it's really not a variance that we're looking at. The height is de minimis. I'm glad to see the lot developed. I think it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to be great for Margate, so I vote in favor.
Clem Wozleski?
The 2 variances asked for, I have no problem with. I don't think that any negative impact on the neighborhood. I vote in favor.
Jim Galantino?
I think it's going to be a nice house on that lot. Bill's a nice job drawing it, and look forward to seeing this coming up. I don't see any problems with this variances. Thank you. Approve it.
Rich Patterson?
I vote no on the application.
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
Mike Cristaldi?
I think it's going to be a good-looking home on the street, an asset to the neighborhood. I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
Really nice project, fits in well with the neighborhood. Maybe I could park there if I take a dip. It's a real nice project.
Your car wouldn't fit in a legal space.
Mike Richmond?
Yeah, I think that the variances requested are de minimis, and I'm going to vote yes.
Application passes 6-1.
Thank you very much.
Next case is Solomon Fine Homes, 780103 Atlantic Avenue, Block 105, Lot 1. What? Lot 1, 1.01 in the CBD district to grant a minor site plan a C variance for lot area, lot width, building coverage, parking, and possibly others. Taxes and water are current, and proof of advertising and notifying is satisfied. Mr. McLaren?
Thank you, Board
Briefly,
Chairman, Board members.
Just,
Wait,
Roger,
wait, wait,
not to interrupt you, Mr. Collins is on the 200-foot list, and Ms. Gubernalte's also recusing himself. And Mr. Collins is because he's on the 200-foot list.
That's gonna be it. It's over.
Tom Collins, he's on the 200-foot list.
Different color than the ones.
Okay. Where were we? Before you is my report for 7801-7803 Atlantic Avenue, currently in the CBD zone. The background is the applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to construct 3 residential units above a new commercial space within the CBD zone. The site currently contains commercial units at grade with residential units above on the corner lot and just commercial on the interior lot that will be demolished. Several C variances are required. Residential use is permitted on upper floors. Residential use on ground floor is not permitted. No subdivision is being proposed at this time. Page 2 is my zoning chart. As you can see, there's existing lot 1, existing lot 1.01. They are combining those lots. That lot will have to be confirmed by the tax assessor's office. But I've identified 5 variances, and there seems to be a discrepancy with the variance plan versus the architectural plans in regard to parking. I think the applicant will address that. But the variances required are as follows on page 3. Lot area, whereas 4,000 square feet is the minimum lot size required for this zone, and 3,929 square feet is proposed after the lot consolidation. Lot width, whereas 50 feet is the required minimum width, and 47.35 feet is the proposed after lot consolidation width. The lot width, I do want to point out, along South Douglas Avenue complies with 80 feet of frontage. Building coverage, whereas 60% is the maximum building coverage permitted, and 84% after lot consolidation is proposed. Parking for residential, whereas 6 total spaces are required per RSIS based on 3 bedrooms per unit and 3 units are proposed, and 5 spaces are proposed on the variance plan. However, 7 spaces are indicated on the architectural plans.
Well, 4 bedrooms are indicated on the architectural plans, too.
Yes.
Okay. Same amount of
Same
parking.
Same space, yeah, I'm sorry.
So that's good.
Parking for residential, or commercial, I'm sorry, typo. Whereas 4 spaces are required per the requirement of 1 space per 200 feet of floor area and 0 spaces are proposed. That additional space will either be for residential or for commercial. I'll leave it up to the applicant to discuss. The variance will still be required. Waivers requested, please see the engineer's report. Are any signs proposed on this application?
Pardon me?
Any signage proposed on this application?
As of right now, no. And whatever signage would be proposed for the commercial would conform.
Okay, fair enough. The site is bounded by the MF zone, the TF zone, the S30 zone, and the S25 zones. Applicant shall provide testimony where trash and recycling will be stored and handled. The applicant shall discuss how the storage requirements are being met for all 3 residential units per section 175-26H. No lighting plan has been submitted for the commercial space. Street opening permits will be required. I think the applicant should discuss the lighting plan and maybe a condition of approval. A lighting plan will be submitted.
Yes.
I will comply. The recently adopted master plan recommends continuing the use at this location as CBD zone. Several recommendations, I'm sure the street trees are required along both Atlantic Avenue and Douglas Avenue. Per the CBD zone, 1 tree for 50 foot of frontage is required. And that's pretty much concludes my report at this time.
Good evening, Brian Callahan of the law firm Callahan Thompson Thompson on behalf of Solomon Bay Fine Homes for the project. Let me have the three people. This is Jake Winograd, who's the principal for Solomon. I have Rami Nasser and John Obelenis. Once again, Mr. Manis, I'd ask we swear everybody in, and then that way, if the board has questions, we can jump in and answer.
Sure. Jake, can you just spell your last name?
Winigrad. Jacob's the first name.
Good. And then, and John and Rami, just state your name and address for the record. And you can state your address too.
36 Southwood Drive, Cherry Hill, New Jersey, 08003.
John Obelenis, 102 South 8th Street, Vineland, New Jersey.
Rami Nassar, 1425 Cantillon Boulevard, Mays Landing, New Jersey.
And do you each swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth? Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Manis, in addition to the documents that you had as part of the package, we brought a rendering tonight, so I would mark that as an A1 to give the board an idea. Quick background, as you remember, we were here a number of months ago just to do straight up condominium, no commercial. 7-0 unanimous denial. We got the message that Atlantic Avenue wanted to maintain a commercial flavor to it. So we've come back with a wraparound with the commercial along the front. It's about 800 square feet of commercial with the residential above, and that even the residential stepped back. So we tried to take your suggestions at that meeting, incorporate them into this plan, and go forward. Let me call Mr. Obelenis, and he can walk you through from an architectural point of view what we've done, and he can also address some of the parking issues and some of the trash and recycling issues. John? Thank you. Brett?
Thank you. The three townhomes and a commercial, we start with the ground floor. We offer a parking garage for a single car, and then we have a garage door and then the proper space between the garage door to the property line. So 2 cars per unit, which is required. We have 4 bedrooms. We have an entry foyer at the ground level. So parking, we have storage, we have recycling, all at the ground level. There's a rear yard, a small rear yard for each unit, dedicated to each unit, including HVAC, all at the backyard.
John, could you stop there?
Yes.
I'm confused. Is it 7 spots or 5 spots?
There's 7 spots.
It is 7 spots.
Yes, there's a coordination issue, but there's going to be 7 spots.
Okay, so when he mentioned 5 spots, it is 7 spots.
We have 2 per residential, and we have 1 dedicated for the commercial at the corner. So that's your first floor, the ground floor basically is parking, storage, and access to the living areas above. We have typically, this is the second floor. On the first living area, we have living, dining, kitchen, bedrooms, and you go up to the second floor. There's only two floors in this proposal, all bedrooms on that second living floor. So basically, it's the ground floor, and we have 2 living levels above that.
Take the Atlantic Avenue side and tell us how we've treated that at the ground level and how you've stepped it back at the second and third levels.
I'm going to show, we have the rendering, and also just to give you an idea of the shades and shadows, we created a lot of interest on the Atlantic Avenue side with the commercial at grade, and that commercial takes over the entire frontage of Atlantic Avenue, from the front to the back up to Douglas Avenue. That's all commercial space. Shown in the rendering also is all commercial space. In this case, a lot of sidewalk activity. You know, we suggested maybe a restaurant, but it just shows that there'll be a separation between the two, between the living areas above. Now, there's we've set back some of the living area off of Atlantic Avenue to create that 3-dimensional effect.
And then also on the opposite side where the easement is against Mr. Varallo, who was here earlier this evening, that easement area will be maintained in between the properties?
Yes, we have an easement of 5 feet on our side and then 5 feet on his side. And one of the concerns was that if that's going to be used for vehicular use, we have a bump out, but that starts at the second living level, which is about 17 feet above grade. So there's plenty of room for vehicle access without hitting the building itself.
And one of the concerns of the board was having that Atlantic facade look more as a front facade. And you've attempted to do that so that we have some decking and we have some bump outs to give it that special feel?
Well, it's special. We created, it's a sort of light feel. It's not a solid facade as you turn the corner. With the decking on Atlantic Avenue, of course, on Douglas Avenue, It's a very soft corner. We have solid retail at the base. We have the setbacks as you turn the corner, so there's light in the air on that corner. And as you go up to the second floor, very similar with the bedroom levels and master bedroom, that we have decking that turn the corner on Atlantic and then continue down Douglas Avenue.
And the commercial also turns the corner, so
Yes.
that we're giving a visual as you come down Douglas and also along Atlantic.
Yes, as you walk down Atlantic toward the project, there's visual potential for signage at that corner, in addition to the frontage on Atlantic Avenue.
I don't have any other questions for Mr.
I have a question for you. I'm thrilled you have that parking with 5 spots. It just wouldn't have happened. But you still need a variance for the commercial parking, correct? Because you have 1 spot?
That's correct. Mr. Nasser was going to address that, yes, but yeah. we have
I'd
one
like
spot.
to address it.
Mr. Nasser?
No,
Go ahead.
let,
Go ahead, finish your thought.
I think just a suggestion, you need a variance anyway. I would see more use of making it a more viable commercial unit and not have that parking spot in there. It seems silly.
Jake, you want to respond? Jump on.
Well, last time we were here, you made it very clear, as you did earlier tonight, about keeping the commercial, your commercial block, a commercial block, and keeping that commercial fabric and look of it.
Yes.
I agreed with what you said back then, and actually felt a little silly having presented what I did before.
You were a good sport about it.
Thank you. That 07 really still hurts. So that's what we're presenting here, and I think it speaks for itself in a lot of ways. Can you bring up just the ground floor? To your point, I know parking is a very serious issue around here, and it was pressed, to make these things work as best they can. So in doing that, I cut this out because we could do that. If we did not have this here, the retail space would work much better. I would like to do that.
You can make it larger than a 7 foot. You have one area that's 7 foot by 12 foot, maybe.
You wanted your commercial space, I got you.
Yes.
If you'll forgo the commercial space, I agree with everything you're saying.
I would like some board discussion on this.
I was going to suggest that, plus you'll give back a street parking place. Yeah, without the curb cut. Yeah.
What's the square footage?
Assuming you're not too close to the corner, I guess, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Square foot.
Of the existing?
What are we proposing right now? John, what does that say, 8? I can't
So
remember.
788.
It's 788.
If we talk about adding.
Well, it's just making that spot in the middle, in the front usable. I mean, it's just, look, we are concerned about parking. We're concerned about parking with residential units.
But usability of that.
But that's not going to be used, and we understand and we welcome commercial development. There's no parking in Margate. There never will be. There's never been. If you're asking for a variance for 1 as opposed to 4, again, with more board discussion, 0 instead of 4, I would prefer, but.
There's 0 there now, and there never has been off-street parking with that commercial space.
To directly answer you, I think that's a great suggestion, not dealing with any other issues.
No, just that issue.
Just this specifically, I say, for board discussion, I'd rather see more viable retail space, get rid of the parking for
I can agree
the
with you.
commercial.
So you would be
We
willing to
would be
change that?
amenable to getting rid
I would
of
do
that
that.
1 parking space and increasing it to retail space.
Okay.
I have a question. The space that is in that area, like right here, this is for one of the units
Yes,
above, right?
that's their
Can you make that smaller?
Well, it affects,
Give it more space.
the stairwells being access to all the floors, to move the stair, we use that to move all the stairs upstairs.
We did actually flip it to create the
Can we
original.
use a microphone,
space here.
please?
Gentlemen, use the microphone.
And 1 at a time, please.
Thank you. Yeah, we did move it originally from the last application to this one to create more space for the retail below, which affected all the units upstairs. And once you move the stair, everything moves. We have to rearrange not that we can't do it, but we thought that at least it afforded all the space in the corner here. Now, if we're talking about.
Well, what do you suggest, capturing more retail or something?
Yeah, in other words, what is this space here?
It's a walkway to their front door.
Is there any way you can move this back?
Move it all the way to the curb.
You're just saying, it comes back to there, yeah.
Well,
That gives
what-
you more, a little more.
If you want to get into it, you're gonna then, you just move the staircase in the middle of the living room, out by the decks.
Well, not just that, but the master bedroom gets,
Yeah,
it's
and
not
the-
a
the
lot
upper,
of stuff,
it's-
so.
I
It's a
mean-
chain, it's sort of a domino effect. Once you move one, everything else gets affected on the two.
But, John, just with removing the parking space, what's the depth of the storefront there, of the store?
Well, then you go from 8 feet basically, and you're getting back 10 feet to 18 feet, from
Yeah,
8 to
that-
18 feet.
Yeah, that's good.
And
That's
then,
a good
and
sign.
then- and then the fenestration's gonna wrap around that corner, and, yeah, so when you come down Atlantic Ave, you're gonna see a glass, fenestration with, hopefully, a lot of activity, and it's gonna be a brand new store.
Are you saying you put glass on the side of the building?
Well, you see-
Well, we wrap around.
I'm turning the corner, because I don't want it to look like a flat facade, I mean, I want it to look like it has dimension. The store speaks for itself. That now we're gonna extend to about here.
Is that glass, is that a glass window there?
It's a glass window.
Okay, I couldn't tell.
We're
I
gonna
can't tell.
extend that over to here.
Okay.
To get that additional space,
We're
and make a much more reasonable retail layout.
Add about another 200 square feet, basically a parking spot plus some extra, so instead of 780, we're almost 1,000 square feet for retail.
I hope this is a
Pull the
typo.
awning- pull
One
the
at a
awning around
time,
the corner?
one at a time.
Yes, yes, because right now the awning is for that piece of it, but that would extend the additional 10, 12 feet that we're gonna add.
Down on the far left, you've got a gable over like, that doesn't agree with the
The whole thing doesn't agree.
No.
Well,
The whole drawing doesn't. We want that. We don't want
My-
this.
My graphic
The
designer
renderers, you know?
took some liberties because these decisions hadn't been.
We are getting that though, not this.
I can only get two.
I
Yes,
mean, there's a
we're
lot of
on that
difference.
level, yes.
There's a lot of difference. Missing windows, you know.
John
You know,
mentioned
we
that
call-
also when he first
we-
saw it, he said he used to do that.
I think Clem will tell you, we call it architectural practice. We keep practicing until we get it right, you know?
Okay.
and
But
sometimes-
I mean, that's what we're gonna end up with.
I like to think.
Please, one at a time, please.
I'm not, I'm,
What I like about this, the same thing you do, and what we did above also, we're trying to keep, because this is a street face.
You
So
get what I'm
People to see this, we want to keep that beachy house feel, we're across from the beach club, so we're trying to line up with them, and keep an obvious commercial.
you get where I'm getting with this?
Yes.
You turning these plans in? Because if you turn these plans in, it's not that building.
Can I can, if you'll allow me, we'll modify the plans to.
That could be a condition.
I mean, we're gonna have to do that anyway for my final drawings.
Yes.
And I'm happy to present them to you.
But I mean, we're voting on this, and it's not that.
But our
You're not
variance.
voting on that, you're voting on this.
Right.
No, we're voting on, I'm sorry. please.
Right, I was gonna say.
And I'm sorry,
if-
too.
If you're asking us, the variance relief that we're requesting from that drawing or this drawing would be the same. If you're asking us, can we present this drawing in with Mr. Obelenis redoing it to submit to Mr. McLaurin for final sign-off, the answer would be,
Thank you.
and the answer would be?
That was
The
very
answer would be-
simple.
I'm trying to be difficult.
Right.
I hear what you're saying.
Mr. Wesleys?
John, down on the far left, you can't see it on that drawing, but you can see it on this drawing. The end of your little sloped roof. That's, I assume, a little bit of it extends past the gable. It appears.
Yes, yes.
It-
And you
it's-
can't see it here, but
Right, but on this drawing, assuming that that piece is going to match this drawing, that roof goes back, maybe 20, 30 feet, and
think
it's
it's just a
sloping into the adjacent building, so all the water that's coming down is going to run against the wall of that
you
adjacent
have to
building.
create a cricket along that edge. We have to ring up.
Why don't you continue that roof sloping towards the street, and then give a very gradual slope to the back of it, to your yard, so you're not draining anything against that building?
Yeah, no, I think that would be
Very
right.
reasonable.
Yeah, I agree, thank you. Let's say, when I finish tonight, I'm gonna be a really good architect between the first presentation, and so I'm picking up these tips here, so thank you.
Good job.
Let me have Mr. Nasser come up and just,
Could I,
go ahead, Dennis.
sorry, and then I'll
No,
stop.
no,
Just,
it's okay.
I think it'll be more beneficial to the board. During your arguments, could you address, we haven't even given you a chance, but the fact that you're under lot area, under lot width, but you're still over building coverage, I think that's a bad combination. We're in a situation where we have less space, but we're doing significantly more. just consider that maybe in your convincing us why.
Well, let me just address lot area and lot width.
Building coverage.
With lot area and lot width, there's nothing I can do about it. They're existing nonconformities, there's no additional land to be built. And I can pretty well indicate to you, without the third unit, project can't get done. Doesn't make, and I know you may not say economic sense or anything else, but we're at 87% coverage for the existing property as it exists right now with 0 parking on site. We're dropping it from 87 to 84, and we're going to be giving you 6 parking on site. And even if you take the off-street parking into consideration, we're still a +3. So we're still going to be +3. You know, and it goes back to what the other application was. Jules and the 2 apartments up there, they're dead. And they've been dead. And he's been looking to get out. And the problem becomes that based on the prices that you have to pay in Margate and the prices to build, if you don't have the third unit, you can't do it. So I mean, fine, the third unit, you could cut it off and you could say, okay, I could put 2 additional cars in there, I could throw a little landscaping in there. Project doesn't do it. Jules will stay there for the next 20 years again. So the only way that the project works is we are reducing coverage, we are adding parking, we're now hopefully, when I say hopefully, you know, we're providing a new retail space, and once again, you're knocking on wood. Is there somebody in Margate who is willing to take that retail space on a year-round basis? Where they can survive on a year-round basis? Can they do that? And, you know, and that's, you know, Mr. Wintergrad's betting that, yes, it can happen. That there is somebody out there that will take, now it's going to be 1,000 square feet of real space to make it. It's not a throw-off. It's real money, real space. Can somebody take that space and make it a go in Margate on a year-round basis? So, but now that I've jumped in with, I'll let Mr. Nasser walk you through and put his professional opinion on it.
All right, I'll try. Sorry, I have to cover this beautiful building picture, so just bear with me for a couple minutes. The existing lot area is 3,929 square feet, which is only 71 square feet shy of the minimum requirement.
I can't hear
Brian,
you.
Brian, just 2 things. I know Rami.
Right. Qualifications I can,
I don't know who he is.
okay.
No offense.
You said 7-0 last time.
Very quick, put your qualifications on.
Licensed professional engineer planner in the state since late 1980s.
Okay.
License planner,
Yes, sir.
you did the project?
Yes, I did.
Good, go ahead.
All right, and speak into the microphone, please. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see it because my glasses, so I thought it's fine.
Okay.
So, all right. The lot area is requirement 4,000 square feet. We have 3,929 square feet, 71 square feet short of the minimum requirements. That's existing nonconformance. We have also the lot width of 26.35, 47 feet, comparing to 50. That's also does not meet the requirement. So these are 2 existing nonconformances. To deal with the building coverage, we have, as you know, on the existing condition, we have an existing building that almost occupy lot 1, and lot 1.01, majority of it is occupied by building. But when you look at this site, it's 100% impervious coverage. Everything is either concrete or building. There's no green space whatsoever. Our proposal is, we're going to put this beautiful building, but in the back, we are going to create a green space, which is at least we are reducing the impervious surface from what's existing now. So in my opinion, it's a benefit. When you look at coverage, I think we should look at impervious coverage, not only building coverage, because that's what causes the drainage problems, that's what causes runoff onto the neighboring property. So in my opinion, I think this proposal is bettering the existing conditions by creating some green space. I know it's not in the front of the property, it's to the back of the building. Dealing with the parking, my plan erroneously showed only 5 parking spaces. They should have showed 7 parking spaces. So 6 will be utilized for the residential, which is in compliance with the requirements. Now, By removing the existing space or the proposed space, now we need additional 5 spaces. So now, this project would require 11 parking spaces. And now we're proposing only 6, so we're deficient by 5 parking spaces. And Clem is correct, we will be able probably to gain a space back along the frontage, which currently we have only 3 spaces. When you look at the building as it exists today, it's about 2,540 square feet. That would require 13 parking spaces with 0 on site. So that is a benefit by having more spaces available for this development than what's there today. Also, you have an existing building that, actually 2 buildings, they look tired, old building, they don't comply with the FEMA requirements. This proposal is going to bring this building into compliance with FEMA, which helps the city in their rating. And also you'll have a project that is pleasant to look at. It's not chopped up buildings anymore. You're having a really beautiful project that was going to be at the corner of this project.
While you're on that particular
Yes,
issue,
sir.
how far up, I'm considering the last application we had, how far up on the building does it have to be flood-proofed here? What's the ground elevation?
The ground elevation is around 7.5.
Okay.
And Mr.
And what's
Golan
what's
said-
the zone? 12.
Well,
So you're at
basically
4
you'll have-
foot.
Right, and also the doors will be flood-proof, so we'll be able to flood-proof this project. And by having a FEMA-compliant project, it will help the project owner and the city at the same time.
CBD, we're actually, the uses that we're proposing are now permitted.
Correct.
We have the commercial on the ground floor, the residential above, that's what the CBD is looking for.
Correct.
CBD also says 0 setbacks, so we're, on the rear, we're promoting the green space in the back of the property by reducing the overall impervious back down to 87%, 84%.
Correct. It's 84%. And
Aesthetically, a clear enhancement to the area.
definitely, I mean, that's how you promote the land use regulations, by having an aesthetically pleasing building comparing to what we have today.
Do you see any negative impact on the character of the neighborhood?
No, I don't think so. I think this is a betterment to what's there now.
Atlantic Avenue right now is commercial, we're gonna give them the commercial. As you go
Correct.
down Douglas Avenue, it's combination of residential and commercial to get down to the corners.
That's correct. It's in compliance with the master plan is looking for.
We have Mr. Varela next door to us as a residential, and you have the
Yes.
Seagrave project, which is
Mhm.
next door to that, which is residential also.
Correct.
So as you go down Douglas,
It's
it's in
residential.
conformity with that.
Yes. And it's allowed use. I mean, the master plan says commercial and residential. It did not say the whole bottom floor have to be commercial. It's not the intent of it. The commercial have to be in a place that it can function as a good commercial product. You don't want to put commercial in the back where people will have a problem getting there now. By not having the commercial also for the whole bottom area, first floor, you're able to have parking for the residential units.
I don't have any other questions, Mr. Nazaro. Got people waving hands?
Yeah. Just a couple clarifications. What's the first floor elevation of the commercial, proposed commercial?
7.5.
Microphone.
7.5.
It's 7.5. We're proposing.
And the proposed first floor elevation of the
Building.
residential?
15.5.
So it'll be 7.5 feet from floor to ceiling?
It'll be 8 feet. Oh, no, 7, yeah. So you'll- not here, this is- look at this one.
Subtract a foot for the thickness of the floor.
Oh, okay.
14.5.
So the first floor will be at 16.5.
16.5?
The first floor will be 16.5, so that gives us 8-foot commercial.
Is it 8 foot or is it 9 foot?
In the store, you'll have 8-foot ceilings?
Sorry?
In your store, you'll have 8-foot ceilings?
Yeah, that will be, yes.
So how you gonna put any, you're not gonna put any lighting or anything in there? Just gonna bare ceilings?
You mean at the commercial end?
Yes.
I'd like the architect to deal with this, so.
Because you have to have clearance to all your lighting, you gotta have clearance to your ceiling fans, anything like that.
That's a good question. I don't have a clear answer for that, other than we show 8 feet clear to the underside of that. We'd have to be creative with not, maybe it's not something that would be in the center of the ceiling, but we would create soffits on the sides that would incorporate air conditioning, ductwork and stuff, and leave a height in the middle and incorporate lighting, air conditioning, things of that sort at a utility space around it and still maintain a nice high ceiling. That would accommodate the utilities and things of that sort.
Well, now's the time to talk. Do you need an additional height to get the ceiling height?
But that's a good point. We're talking about creating a retail space that's workable, a little more functional or flexible. Yeah, and since we have 2 stories, we have room for maximum height to do that, to raise it to a little higher space. And
How much height do you need? Do you need another foot, foot and a half?
I'd say 1.5 feet to allow for a drop ceiling, to allow for utilities and ductwork and dozen a year. 2 feet. I have to make sure that we have the height that we're working with, overall height and stuff. But
What's our overall height right now, Mr. Valens?
34. I calculate you're over 34 foot from top of curb already.
We would
Bear
technically
with
then-
us for a second.
We would then need a height variance, which would still be a C variance, to pick up to 2 feet, because we would be less than the 10%, so we would go from 34 to 36 at that level, which would still be a C variance, but would give us the room downstairs to handle what Mr. Galantino was saying, which is, A, getting your ductwork in, getting your lighting in, and getting everything in at that point in time.
That's what you're looking at a grid system like this up there, so you can get your stuff to move around. You're not going to be putting it on sheetrock, so you need something to work with.
I mean, that's 2 feet enough?
Ask
I mean,
for
if you're
3,
not-
it's still a C variance.
C variance, still.
Yep, 9.5, 9. Good. That gives you enough room for a
You're
high
saying
hat.
going to 10 feet. Is 10 feet enough?
Taking it from an 8 to a 10 and adding 34.
Or should they go to 11?
10's great.
10's fine.
10's great.
We are 34 feet from the curb right now.
So we would be adding 2 feet to that, so we'd be asking for a C variance to go to 36 above curb, which would give you the 2 feet in the
retail space.
in the retail space to get do the things you need to do.
Yeah.
They should get the answer. Ask for the extra.
Go ahead and say it again.
Brian, I think you should ask for the extra foot just in case it's still a C variance.
Go for 37? you think?
37,
To be on the safe side, you think? Okay.
not to exceed,
Not to exceed.
that's 3. No, it's commercial, so it's measured from top of curb, which is, we have to get rid of that. But I think to be conservative, ask for the 3 feet, you're still below the 10%, it's still C variance. If you go less than that, you're gold.
I agree with Roger.
Well, that, we just talked about that.
And look, if you need to have a little bit extra room, raise the floor an extra 1/2 foot. There's a 1/2 foot less of,
Raise the grade you're talking about.
yes.
But then we're trying to create headroom for the
No,
retail.
No,
he's
I'm
giving you 3 feet instead of 2 feet, so you have room to raise the floor a little bit.
There's another 1/2 foot of less floodproofing you have to do.
Yeah, right?
Okay.
Why don't you just take the 37 feet and figure it out? If it comes to 36,
Right.
anyway,
Or-
at least you got the
I think the board is willing to give you that, you work top down now.
Yeah.
37's fine, perfect recommendation, and you have room to juggle as you need to juggle.
Right.
To raise it 6 inches, put it in, as Mr. Galantino said, it would work then. Gives the architect now your creative license to make it work.
Thank you.
And the floor is still going to be a 7.5?
I think they're gonna be able to raise it a
They'll
little
be
bit.
able to raise it,
Yeah.
which is a good thing.
That can probably go up to 8. But we need to ensure the ADA requirements.
Where's your flood elevation?
It's
12.
11, plus 1 is 12.
12. Yes.
Clem, you need a microphone, please.
Yeah, we'll use it. I'm going to get you one.
There's apparently an engineer's report floating around that I haven't seen.
Yes.
Is there waivers?
I want to discuss that also.
Okay.
All right, Roger still has the floor.
There's several, the engineer's report, which is dated September 13th, 2017, from Remington and Murnick. Page 2, under the review, section A, items 1 through 10, are several waivers requested. Are they
Correct.
still valid?
The survey of the property we can provide. We're asking for a waiver of the location of existing water courses, waiver of stormwater management, waiver of soil erosion because we're not 5,000 square feet, waiver of circulation plan. The location description of proposed signs will show as part of our final plan. Copies of the guarantees, master deed, of course, because we'll be a condominium, we do that. List of required licenses, permits will show that. Traffic impact statement, we'd ask for a waiver on.
I would support those waivers, as they really do not apply to this application.
The general review comments, we will show on our final plans. It's really cross slopes on sidewalks in excess. So it's really out of my bailiwick and over to Mr. Nasser's bailiwick, showing those types of things for the engineering drawings to show how the sidewalks work and ADA works and that type of thing. Is there anything in that report that you really have any objection to?
No, we're okay with it.
Okay.
And Brian, I apologize because I was looking for my report, but in that section A, can you just run through them real quick? Just, okay. Requesting a waiver from 2 and 7.
2 and 7
Actually, all.
and 10. We don't need I don't think we need a traffic impact
Right.
statement.
And stormwater management is not applicable.
They'll comply with that.
Stormwater management not applicable,
Waiver.
soil erosion is not
Waiver.
applicable.
Waiver.
Percolation plan is not applicable.
They'll comply
So yeah,
with
so
that.
waivers would be technically number 2,
Got
number
it.
3, number 4, number 5,
Number 7.
number 7, and
Number
number
10.
10.
Number 6 also, true, right?
No, the signage we'll be doing as part of our plan for the retail space.
Well, you're asking for a waiver as part of this
As
application,
part
right,
of this
Nate?
application,
Yes,
then we would submit it as part of our overall.
Perfected plans.
For the zoning application.
Correct.
Brian, you gotta resubmit, revise.
Yes, to Mr. McLaurin, that based upon Mr. Cristaldi's comments, the revised plans are going to be extremely comparable to the plan that you see tonight.
Well, when you submit it, will you submit copies of that along with it, so we can make.
Yes, I mean, yes, so yeah, we'll be able to put those on 11 by 17s or whatever it is, so that Mr. McLaurin has a reference to take a look at, since he won't have that in front of him, correct?
So you're going to submit a new rendering? Is that?
No. Existing renderings, just see that the plans.
I'll make sure that.
Use the microphone.
Sorry. We're saying yes, 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 the architect will match the rendering. You know, in case there's a French door in a bathroom in the rendering, I'll make sure that, you know, we make it work. We're trying to make it consistent. There might be 1 or 2 things that are not exactly right, but I will just try to stay true to what the rendering has.
John, you have to consider everything you've learned tonight, too.
Please, it's an education,
Right.
okay?
And the addition of the commercial space technically makes the requirement 5 on the commercial. Right, 6 and 5, and you're requesting, complying with 6 and 0 on the other.
Correct.
Got it.
You done?
We're done.
Glasses will. Glasses will.
Hearing nothing from the board, is anyone from the public like to comment? Anybody behind you? The public portion is closed.
And on this, 9 members can vote. We need 5 to pass because a minor site plan is involved. We need a motion for minor site plan approval together with the following C variances: lot area of 3,929 square feet where 4,000 feet is required, lot width of, let me stop real quick. Are you consolidating the lots
We will be consolidating the lots.
as a condition of
As a
approval?
condition of approval, we've talked to the tax assessor to get her new lot number.
Okay, so just to reframe the motion, we need a motion for minor site plan approval together with the following C variances: lot area of 3,929 square feet where 4,000 feet is required, lot width of 47.35 feet where 50 feet is required, building coverage of 84% where 60% is permitted, parking variance for the commercial aspect where 5 spaces are required with the addition of the new retail and 0 spaces are proposed, a building height of 37 feet above curve where 34 feet is permitted, and the following conditions will apply. The applicant will, eliminate the 1 commercial space and create more retail space. The applicant will consolidate the lots. The applicant will comply with all the representations made during the course of the hearing. And there's also the following waivers set forth in the city engineer's report dated September 13th, 2017. Those are numbers in section 1A, numbers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 10. And the other conditions will be all the conditions set forth in Mr. McLaren's report dated March 29th, dated September 25th, 2017, and the city engineer's report dated September 13th, 2017, unless modified tonight.
That is correct.
I've one additional comment. If you're able to raise a commercial floor and you need to go out into the public right away with your landing to comply with ADA standards, you would need an encroachment license. I don't see that being a major hurdle. I think the justification to do that is adequate.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'll make the motion.
Remy? A Desmond, a second?
Remy?
I'm
Atta
here,
girl.
I'm here.
Clem Wazeski?
I think with the changes that have been made, it's certainly a vast improvement over the original presentation. It gives us the commercial space that we're trying so hard to preserve. I vote to approve the application.
Jim Galantino?
I like the concept. I think it's going to move Margate in a different direction than that street. I was really worried about the flooding proofing, how it's going to go down. Roger and I talked about it, and I think it's going to work. But the ceiling height was critical because you don't want to go and be in a box. And that's what your ceiling height would have caused. But it's going to address the rest of the street down because it's going to work in with the other developments down on Douglas. But I'm looking forward to working with you guys and see what you got going on. I approve it.
Rich Patterson?
I also approve the application. I see something here that's not just commercial space, it's viable commercial spaces, which is what we're looking for, and it's not always what we get. I was walking in here voting no against this because I saw 5 parking spots and 1 spot for a 4-bedroom house just wasn't going to cut it, so I'm thankful that I was looking at the wrong plans. With doing it that way, you were just jamming too much in, and this is much improved over the other, and And also, the other thing that I commend you on is really jazzing up the Atlantic Avenue side, that really looks like the front of a building from Atlantic, and it looks like the front of a building from Douglas, which also we request people do, and it's not always followed. And I think if that rendering is followed, you've done a good job.
Mike Cristaldi?
I think the rendering's fantastic. The drawing's actually good. It might be worth looking into because you're gonna be somewhere around 4 foot high with the glass for the storefront.
We're voting now, we're not commenting.
If you can look into like a glass that's rated for it, I would still vote yes.
Craig Palmisano?
Very nice job on the design and the changes that were made. It's a big improvement, and it looks like a nice job on the Atlantic Avenue storefront stuff. I approve it.
Mike Richmond?
I think it's a great project. I think that space on Atlantic Avenue will be viable and rentable or usable, so I like it. I vote yes.
Remy Pelosi?
For all the reasons previously stated on the record, I too will vote in favor of the project.
Despina Hess?
Surprised, I'm gonna agree with everything Mr. Patterson said. I came in here and you changed my mind. I didn't want a situation where you have a building where new homeowners are complaining about existing area. I don't want you to have people coming in and saying there's too much noise. You have a viable commercial opportunity, and I think it'll fit in with the other commercial areas. With the changes you've made, I think that the positives will outweigh the negative, and I vote in favor of the application.
Joe DiGirolamo?
It's a great project, cleans up the corner, really looks great. It's very attractive looking. I think all the changes you made from the last time to this time, I vote yes.
Jake, congratulations. You went 9-0.
That's a 16-vote swing.
We'd also like to say thank you for all of your comments.
Seriously.
They really make this a much better project. Roger, thank you very much, and everyone else.
Mr. Patterson? Mr. Patterson? Is there a public portion? Are we making an motion to adjourn?
Yes. I thought
No, that motion was for...
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.